Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sitting here at Wadiyar Centre for Architecture in Mysuru. And honestly, I must say, what a wonderful campus. And I'm today conversing with Prashanth Girish Pole, a wonderful educator and who has been practicing architecture for 30 plus years through his firm Genesis Architects. He is one of the founding trustee of this institute. He has been loved by students, respected by professionals. Today's topic is what kind of architects are we producing? A hard conversation on architecture education in India. My intention with this conversation is to do my little effort in uplifting quality of Indian architecture education. Thank you so much, Prashant, for making your time for this.
Thank you so much, Clinton, for the opportunity as a school and as an individual to talk about the school. Love to be here.
Yes. What kind of thinking does architecture education in India reliably produce? And is that thinking adequate for the responsibility architects carry?
Good question. The question which we have been pondering over for a pretty long time right now. As a country, the history of architectural education in this country is rooted in a school called the JJ School of Architecture in Bombay. And it was set by the British basically to produce people with technical skills. In simpler words, people who could make drawings, who could read drawings, and then who could probably even execute those drawings. So the emphasis was on skill. The emphasis was on people who could accurately make and read drawings and obviously execute those drawings on site. Skill was the mantra at that point of time. Thinking was not probably the underlying feature of that particular kind of education. And for a very long time, we have been practicing that as the foundation for the architectural education course across the country, across various schools, where unfortunately the syllabi has not kind of caught up with the times. And skill is still, to a very large extent, the byword. And which was probably also required at that point of time because skill produced people who could then get jobs. So the fundamental idea of producing people with skills was that skills would automatically imply that the jobs for those skills would obviously be there out there in the open because there are not that many people in the field. The rest of the country, in fact, a large part of the country didn't even know who an architect is or what does an architect do. So as a professional, there were very few people who would walk out of any of these colleges at that point of time. There were hardly 3 or 4 colleges in the country which produced architects. You had JJ, then over a period of time, School of Planning and Architecture at New Delhi, and then CEPT in Ahmedabad. So there were probably 4 or 5 schools which were producing architects, which was a very meager number for the amount of work that the country probably had in terms of what an architect could do. So skill as a byword, I think, was not just to do with architecture. I think it was across the board where the job market required people with skills. So if you look at people migrating to cities at that point of time, and even an uneducated person, if he had the right skills, he could survive in the city because the skill would guarantee a job. Whether it was mill owners, people flocking to Bombay to work in mills, or the industrial towns like Jamshedpur and places like that where they would work in steel factories or wherever else, as long as you had a skill, you could survive. You could make a living out of it. As times have gone by, we are now 75 years of independence and the country has obviously grown and the world has also grown in leaps and bounds from where it was at that point of time. Today, even a commoner on the street, even a laborer or a villager in the hinterland of the country knows that just a skill will not guarantee a job. I can't go to the city thinking that I have a skill and I'll get a job. Education is a must now. So even people down in the villages or in our own field, masons and electricians and carpenters and that entire service sector industry is making their children go out there to get educated. Unless people are able to do something by themselves, the job market is not available for just skills anymore. You need to do more than that. And that has changed the way you look at this thing called skill, which I think has brought us to the point where, whether it is architecture as a profession, medicine, chartered accountancy, lawyers, with so many people out there today with these degrees coming out from various universities and colleges, just being somebody who carries a degree today is of no use. So that there is a requirement for kids walking out today to be good at what they do. Just a degree in our times probably guaranteed a job, even guaranteed respect to a certain extent, because you were an architect or a doctor or an engineer, which was probably the bywords or the by professions at that time, where the minute you are an engineer or a doctor, which was obviously the only thing people gravitated to, either you become an engineer or a doctor, because it guaranteed jobs, it guaranteed respect, it guaranteed a certain position in society. Today, not so, because there are so many people out there coming out with the same degrees, with the same skill sets. The only ways a person will survive today or make a name for himself or even do good at what he's doing is only if he's good at it. Now, going good at it means automatically somebody then has to teach you to be good at it. Somebody, the schools and the institutions have a responsibility now to produce people who are not just skill ready, but also thinking ready. So there's a huge premium on thinking, the huge premium on somebody who can think and do things differently, not just produce stuff which has been read or digested or do things by rote.
Right.
That is not going to guarantee you anything today. And that is what you're seeing in the job market today. You'll realize that there are a lot of courses which are simply dying down because professionals coming out of these courses are not skilled enough, not thinking enough. So when they're not thinking enough, the industry can't absorb them, because the industry has been forcing institutions to produce people who are coming out with the right skills. Unfortunately, skills are not enough today. Given technology the way it is progressing today, every 6 months there's an upgrade in technology, a new software comes, or a new equipment comes, or a new method of doing things comes, and you obviously have to learn it because that's a new skill in town.
Right.
So you can't keep producing people who are updated on a day-to-day basis, because that is something they will learn by themselves. For example, in our times when we studied architecture, there were no computers in the class. All of us came out with drafting skills, hand-drawn drawings and stuff like that. Within 2 years of coming out of the school, there were computers in the market. And at that time, I remember you had to remove your chappals and shoes outside the computer room before you go and even touch the computer. It was like one deity in a puja room. And that we learned. I mean, all of us learned computer skills because it was a skill required to survive in the profession. That's a skill. So skills you will learn depending on which part of the spectrum you are in the job market. If a particular kind of skill is required to perform a particular kind of job, you'll automatically learn that skill. What a person can't probably learn out there when he's out there is probably the ability to think, which only a school can give him. At least it opens his mind to looking at things where you can think differently. And that, I think, is the biggest responsibility of educational institutions across the spectrum. I'm not restricting it to architecture. I'm saying across the spectrum. It is happening in schools. Schools are looking at alternative thinking. Schools are looking at alternative modes of education. It has to move into the professional bodies. It has to move into the higher education system where you're producing people who are thinkers and not just doers. And that is the only edge you can give them if they have to survive in the so-called job market of tomorrow. So that, I think, is the key to that question that you're asking. It's saying that is the architectural education system today producing what it was producing then, and is it right for today? It is definitely not right for today. It was right then because the numbers were small. The market was small, the numbers were small, it guaranteed jobs, it guaranteed respect, it guaranteed a certain stature in society.
It's not anymore.
Not so anymore because there are too many people out there. The only guarantee today is you have to be good at what you do.
Right.
Across the board, in any field, unless you're good at what you do, and that good at what you do only comes if your thinking is right. If your mind is open to looking at newer ideas, newer ways of doing things, that is the only guarantee that you have in any field today. That is the only edge or the only thing that will help you survive and probably do good in whatever you're doing. Added to that would also be the fact that when you say you're good at something, it also implies a passion in the process. And that passion is something which only a school can provide. Along the way, yes, along the way, probably 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, after a degree or after something, people also develop passions along the way as they get interested in doing things, whatever they're doing. Nobody's denying that. But for the majority, that interest or that, I mean, all of us remember our teachers who were good in school. All of us remember our teachers who were good in college. Maybe one, maybe two. But you remember them because they ignited something in you. They made you think something differently, hence you remember them. That is the job of a school. To be able to ignite that little thing in your mind, which then becomes this passion that you call as a big word, which you carry for the rest of your life. Right. But the kindling of that light is somewhere in an educational institution.
Are we producing too many architects today?
I would sadly say no. We are a huge country, 1 billion plus. This profession, unfortunately, because of the way it has been structured, has produced architects who think that their spectrum of work in terms of design is unfortunately limited by this word called typology. I need to do a hospital, I need to do an airport, I need to do a 5-star hotel, I need to do a 7-star hotel, and all these jobs exist only in the cities. So everybody after their degrees gravitate to the cities because their dreams are there. Right through your architectural education, you dreamt of these big things that you would end up doing sometime in life. It's like a Shah Rukh Khan or a Amitabh Bachchan. Everybody wants to be one, and everybody lands up in Bombay. Very few end up actually being that, whatever they are. But then that is one spectrum of design which probably worked 30, 40 years back, where these kind of buildings or these kind of large projects only happened in the cities, and hence people had to gravitate to the cities to fulfill their dreams in some ways. Today, this country has tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. There are, as per the government, there are 100 new cities being planned as tier 2 or tier 3 cities. There is so much of development across the board, across the country, not now, even before, more so now, where professionals like architects and other professionals are required across the board. So gravitating to the cities for opportunity to design, I think, is a misnomer. It is not the only thing that an architect can do. Which is exactly what we keep talking in school also, saying that everything that you look out in the hinterland, be it the villages or be it the towns or be it the upcoming towns and cities, there is always an opportunity to design. Forget the name, forget the category. If you remove the label, there is enough to design. And if your eyes are open, I think, I remember a very interesting, I won't say a quote, probably a joke, if one would call that. There were two salesmen standing in a shoe shop, and the manager asked them that please go out into the villages and try and figure out if there's a market for shoes in the village. One of them comes back within a day and says, sir, that nobody wears even chappals in that village, so forget about selling shoes. So I don't think there's any market out there at all. The second guy comes back after 2 days and he says, sir, nobody wears even chappals in that village. I think there's a huge market out there. So it's purely how you look at it. So if you say that there is an opportunity to design, then there's a whole country is in front of you.
Wow.
And there is so much to do if you think that there is so much to do. If you say it's only in the cities, then there is no market.
Right.
And that market is saturated because everybody is moved into the cities, and that's a saturated market. Even in terms of opportunity to design, real estate values are high. Opportunity to design is shrinking. In fact, it is so much commerce driven in the cities now that the ability to make a difference through design is shrinking because of the commercial pressures. It is time that people realize that there is so much more to do outside where the opportunities still exist. And before those opportunities vanish, it is good that professionals go out there and do it. So if you ask me, you need many more schools of architecture and many more architects coming out there, because there's a huge, I won't use the word market, I would use the word, there's a huge opportunity out there in this country for design. And design can make a difference. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, if design can make a difference, there are multiple opportunities to design.
That's the purpose of design.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I would definitely not agree with the fact that...
because I saw the statistics.
We have too many schools of architecture. I think we have too little.
Right. The statistics says we produce 21,000 architects annually. So it seems like a big number.
If you're only looking at the cities.
Right. Okay.
If you're looking at the country, it's hardly a number.
Correct. So, I mean, the next question I have might sound silly because I'm an outsider. I have an excuse. But I have heard architecture firms say that, like, architecture education everywhere is 5 years, very intense, workaholic driven. I mean, a lot of
True.
it goes very intensely.
True.
And yet, every firm agrees that fresh graduates still struggle with the real world projects.
Correct.
If a system runs for 5 years and consistently produce graduates who aren't ready, what is the system actually optimizing it for?
Now, which is exactly what I was trying to say when I said skill versus thinking. The job of a school, a good school at least, is to produce people who understand the issues involved when they walk out into the profession. To do projects is what I say is the skill. Now, a student walking out of an architecture school is not necessarily prepared only to do, to become an architect who will do real world projects. I can walk out of an architecture school wanting to be somebody who's in the profession, wanting to be an architectural writer, wanting to be an architectural photographer, wanting to be a journalist, wanting to be a graphic designer, wanting to be anything in design related to this field. So walking out to be only somebody who will practice and work in somebody's office is something which is driven by a skill. Now, there are umpteen types of offices out there. There are offices which work huge infrastructure and real world projects, like you said. There are architects who practice vernacular sustainable building practice kind of architecture. There are other architects who work with newer materials and newer technologies. Now, a school can't train a student in all these things and say, well, I'm sending you out now. If you're skilled in all of this, probably you will fit in somewhere. We can only produce people who have the ability to learn, who have the ability to absorb the environment in which they work. Now, if somebody is keen on probably working in a green practice, he'll probably go and work there and absorb those skills over a period of time. It may take 5 months or 6 months or a year, and probably within a year, he's ready with the skills that are required to work in that kind of an environment. That skill upgradation is something which a student needs to do when he walks out. The 5-year course is only an introduction.
It's like a framework,
The 5-year course is only an introduction to this subject called architecture. Even after 40 years, I don't think I'm qualified enough to say I know this subject fully well. We are still learning this subject. So 5 years is just an introduction. It's like a teaser trailer. I just introduce you to this subject called architecture. From there, your journey actually starts of what kind of an architect do you want to be? A practicing architect, a writing architect, a traveling architect, somebody who is documenting, somebody who is involved with critical issues in society, somebody who is an activist. It could be any form of the profession that one could choose to be, depending on what one's interests are at that point of time. This is just an introduction. So to produce people who will say they will be, which is exactly what I said, who will be job ready at the end of 5 years,
Correct.
is not the job of architectural education.
Not the approach anymore.
It is definitely not our job, because then it goes back to my previous argument saying that then you're producing skill ready people. And skills today are a dime a dozen in the market. I know schools which produce people who are extremely good at softwares, the latest softwares which are available in the market, and offices are extremely happy to absorb them because students from XYZ school come up with ready with all the software skills that are required. But that software has a life. 6 months, 1 year, a new software is in the market. The same guy will probably have to learn that new software if he's interested in software-driven architecture, if you want to call it that, or somebody new will pick up that skill again. So that skill has its time frame. And a 5-year education to architecture is definitely not focused on producing people who will come out with only skills. Like I said earlier, in today's time and space, you can only produce people, or it should be only producing people who have the ability to think. And if that is there, then what to think and how to take that forward is that person's journey after 5 years. If the profession feels that, or offices and practices feel that architects coming out of schools are not ready enough to be working in offices, I think it is the owners of the offices then to train them for the skills that they require. If it's an office which is producing large-scale projects, then it is the owners of that office to take in people, and if the kids are interested and are hardworking and are willing to learn, I think they will learn their skills pretty fast.
Is architecture summed up as training students to have good judgment?
Judgment as in?
Like architecture is where you are given set of constraints, uncertain environments and variables. The job of an architect, I feel, is like combining everything and coming up with a good judgment. of a plan, of an approach?
I will not use the word judgment there. I'll probably use the capacity to make a decision. Because any design process, be it designing a pencil or a phone or a table or a light or whatever else it is a process by which one is producing some object of design, if you want to call it that. But that process of design is a process during which the designer is taking decisions based on something. To give you a simple example, if I have to design a pencil, the questions I would ask is that pen to be thrown after 5 uses? Is it an ink pen or is it a gel pen? Is it a statement pen or is it just a use and throw pen? So with every constraint or every parameter that you're looking at in the process of design, you're making a decision. If it is an ink pen, then it requires a nib. If it is an ink pen, it requires a refill. If it is an expensive pen, it requires a certain kind of a material. If it's a statement, then it requires something else. So every parameter that is thrown in the process of design is producing a decision in the reverse. It helps you make a decision. So I won't use the word judgment. As a school or as an educational institution, it is our job to show students the possibilities as they're moving up from first year to final year of the parameters that influence the design making process. And as you keep going up the years, the parameters keep increasing. If I'm designing with probably 2 or 3 parameters in the first year, by the time I've come to my thesis of the final year, probably I'm thinking about the city. And there are probably 100 parameters which are out there which I have to think while taking decisions related to design. It could be about infrastructure, it could be about people, it could be about climate, it could be about technology, it could be about culture, it could be about heritage, it could be about history, it could be about sustainability. There may be 100 parameters out there which are influencing your design making decision process.
Wow.
And as a school or in the education process, you're slowly upgrading the ability of a student to look at the number of parameters he or she is addressing in the design making process and the decision making process that is involved in the process. For every parameter that is thrown in, I'm supposed to take a decision. If it is regarding climate, what is the decision I take? If it is regarding material, what is the decision I take? If it is regarding culture, what is the decision I take? So as a designer, you're always making decisions based on the parameters that you're looking at. And the larger the plate, it's like peeling an onion. The more layers of the onion you keep peeling, that many more possibilities are there in terms of what you can do with it. Every design is looked at as a process where what are the layers that I need to address while going through this process of design. And every layer that I address is a decision I make. And that decision then helps me process that design from beginning till end. So the more the layers I address, the more possibility of me being, I won't say right, of having addressed at least the larger issues that are involved with that design. So I think that is the whole key of this process called decision making, which is involved in the design process. I won't use the word judgment. Anyway.
So what does teaching that look like? So many parameters and...
No, which is what I said. So from first year to final year, the course is structured where a first year student is looking at design at a very, very simple, very ordinary level where probably there are only 1 or 2 parameters. Probably there's a shape or says color or something like that. The only 2 or 3 things which you're forced to look at, and with that produce something. So you're not burdened with too many hang-ups, if you want to call that, while doing that design making process, because you just got into the course. You have to unlearn your 10+2 pattern of education where you probably worked till your 12th standard only for marks. Your education process has been mostly by rote. You mug and you vomit, in simpler words. That has been your educational process for almost till the 12th standard. And you come and join architecture. So the first year is actually an unlearning process, where you stop looking at your neighbors for clues. Because what I am doing is not exactly what he is doing, because each one's process of the creative process is different. Now, what I do and what somebody else is doing in the next table or the table next to that are entirely different, because each one of us processes it differently.
Beautiful.
So because we are processing it differently, the students also need to, over a period of time, understand that me looking at the other guy is of no use, because his thought process is entirely different. My thought process is mine. So this ability to understand that a design process is extremely individual takes time. Because till 10 plus 2, it has always been the collective. XYZ got 90, why are you not getting 90? Or somebody has got 92, why are you not struggling for 92? Because the pattern of education is the same for everybody. So if it is 10 plus, if it is 2 plus 2, 4, for everybody it's 2 plus 2, 4. So if somebody can get 94, then you should also get 94. So it has been that competition or that rat race up to 10 plus 2. Now suddenly you're supposed to unlearn all that when you come and join architecture. You're supposed to totally forget what your neighbors are doing and think about what you are doing. And unfortunately, nobody's asked you, what are you going to do in your schooling education? You've always been asked to look at what neighbors are doing. If he's doing so well and that he's doing so well, why can't you do it? So your education has always been by comparison. Now suddenly you are forced to say that, forget the comparison, now look at yourself. Now it takes time. Who am I?
Right.
It takes time for you to understand, what am I supposed to think for myself, which is not my neighbors.
And to have a confidence in oneself.
So that first year is so critical because you're trying to build confidence. You're trying to make somebody speak for what they believe in. So actually the entire first year, semester 1 and semester 2, is not so much about the design making process. It's more about finding yourself as an individual. Who are you as an individual? To find that individual space takes time because nobody's asked you to do that in your 10 plus 2.
Right.
Nobody has asked you to find yourself in 10 plus 2. And suddenly somebody is now asking you, what are you thinking about this? Now, I don't know what am I thinking about this. I am looking at my neighbors. What is he thinking? Then I'll probably repeat the same answer.
That's the shock they have when they come.
So the first year is extremely critical because it takes time for students to realize, am I good at this course? Did I join the right course? And it is our responsibility as teachers to make them feel confident that it is the right course. I remember a wonderful example quoted by somebody saying that a student coming and asking a teacher saying that, I don't think I'm creative enough. So the teacher looks at him and says that, did you sleep well last night? So he said, yeah, I slept well last night. Did you dream? He said, yeah, I dreamt something. Can you describe your dream? So he describes a very wonderful dream of what he dreamt in the night. He says, when you're sleeping, if you can be so creative, then imagine how creative you are when you're awake. So creativity has got no parameters in that sense. Every individual in his own way is creative. So to disqualify somebody from saying that you're not fit for this course or this is not your cup of tea, I don't think cuts ice, basically because given the right environment and given the right push or whatever, I think anybody can perform. It's not that difficult. So the first year is basically that, to build confidence in students that they've joined the right course and they will make something out of this in their lives. And then slowly, once that confidence is built in the first year, then slowly then you start progressing as the years go by, of making them aware of issues or constraints, as you said, which will then shape their design process as they go up. And that keeps getting complicated, like I said, as you go year after year, for them to understand and comprehend all these various layers of onion peeling that I call, to address how many layers can I address. And then slowly you realize that you love this process.
So where does reasoning stand in architecture education?
This is another corollary which keeps coming up in the first year when we talk to students saying that, can you distinguish between these three words, art, craft and design? Who is an artist? Who is a craftsman? And who is a designer? Now, as an artist, what is the process that an artist employs? He absorbs stuff that is happening around him. Daily life, things you see, society, movies, culture, reading. You're absorbing all that is happening around you in the immediate environment, and sometimes from news across the globe or whatever it is. And then you process it in your mind in some ways, and then you churn it out in some form of an expression. That expression of whatever you do is your art form. My expression could be in the form of dance. My expression could be in the form of a painting. My expression could be in the form of a piece of sculpture. My expression could be drama or theatre. But that is still an artist. It's an individual expression of what somebody has processed in his mind, of whatever he's absorbed from what is around him. That is how an artist works. And an artist is not worried about, or at least good art is not worried about, the perceiver, who's receiving the art. That is entirely left to the person who's receiving it. His intelligence, his emotional capacity, his way to respond to that piece of art is entirely the viewer's. The artist is not presupposing what he or she should respond to a piece of art. The artist performs for his own satisfaction. It's an extremely individualistic profession where you perform and you do things purely based on what you're doing. Now cut that to, let's say, a designer, let's say an architect. Your art form has a responsibility because there are people involved in your art form. In simpler words, your art form is an object of use. People have to use the spaces that you design. They have to use the schools in which they study. They have to use the hospitals in which they get well. They have to use resorts and hotels where they go and enjoy themselves. They have to use public institutions where you go and work, or workplaces. All those spaces are places where people spend their lives. And as an architect, your job is to make those spaces exciting, or make those spaces work for the purpose for which they were meant to be. If it's a school, is it a place for learning? Is the environment rich enough for somebody to feel like I'm learning something here? Is it conducive to learning? Or if it's a hospital, is it an environment conducive to healing? Do I feel good in this hospital and I get better soon because the environment is such? I see something, probably there's green out there, probably there's open space, probably there's the voice of birds. I don't know. What would you want in a place for healing? As an architect, am I doing all those things that particular purpose of space demands? And that is where our profession becomes a little different or a little difficult, basically because your art form is people-driven. People use your spaces. You can't say, I did this because I liked it. You have additional responsibility because apart from you loving what you did, it is also to be loved and used by people who love those spaces and enjoy being in those spaces. So that's the distinction between what an artist does and what we do as architects. So our responsibility, I think, lies much larger because people use those spaces. They spend their lives in those spaces. So whether it is a place of stay, a place of work, a place to heal, a place to educate, a place to entertain, all your life you're in some space or the other. And if those spaces are good, make you feel nice about a particular place, I think that's the job of what those spaces are supposed to do. And hence your responsibility probably is that much more.
So can strong reasoning produce something visually unimpressive?
Can strong reasoning produce something which is...
Is it always the case where good reasoning means something visually pleasing or amazing space?
I will go the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Is visually pleasing the only job of architecture? Which is what unfortunately most people believe. That it is our job to produce good-looking objects which would sit out in cities and towns and streets and people pass them by and they look good. Now, so I'll probably turn this question a little on its head. Is that the job of an architect, or is that the job of good architecture? Probably no. So I'll again come back to a corollary or a example which I always use in the first year, because a lot of first year students always come back and ask, or would have faced this question while choosing a subject called architecture, is somebody in the family or somebody relative or some uncle, cousin, some will always ask, what is the difference between what a civil engineer does and what do you do? A civil engineer also makes buildings. You also make buildings. So what is the difference between what he or she does and what you do as an architect? And most people, and I ask this question sometimes even to the final years when they're walking out, do you know the difference now after 5 years? And it's an interesting comparison, basically, because that is exactly what I think architectural schools need to concentrate on today, all the more so because of the onslaught of media, websites and interactive platforms and the social media and so much more, where objects are picked basically because they look good. It works well when it is a product. It's a great pen or a great watch or probably a great looking cell phone is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But then when it comes to making buildings or to doing architecture, I think there is this additional responsibility where, or I'll go back to that corollary. The job of a civil engineer, which is probably, if you say that there's a box to be made, and the job of the civil engineer is to make that box right. If it's a shelter, depending on what climate it is in, if it is raining, if it's snowing, if it's hot, if it's cold or whatever, it is to make that box function well, structurally right, stable, doesn't leak, keeps the temperature out. To make that box engineeringly perfect is the job of what a civil engineer does. Then what does an architect do? So the difference is, the box holds some space inside it, and the box excludes some space outside it. The job of the architect is to deal with that space, because people spend time in that space. They are not concerned with the box. The box is required to make the space. But the space by itself is what the architect is dealing with. You're actually dealing with emptiness. So when I'm inside a box, where does the light come from? What is the view that I'm looking at? How does the inside connect with the outside? What is happening in the in-between? What kind of volume is there inside which will make me feel good or bad? Is it a place for reflection? Is it a place for meditation? Is it a place for gathering? Is it a place where 100 people gather or 1,000 people gather? What kind of volume? Where does the light come from? That space is what an architect is concerned with, where people live their lives. The box is a result of how to make that space. If I require a particular kind of box or a particular shape or a particular design, it is coming because the space is demanding it, not because the box has to be beautiful. In the process, the box will probably become beautiful. Somewhere we kind of lose that distinction between the object as you see from outside and the object as perceived from inside. As an architect, our job is actually the space inside the object where people spend their lives. Is that space meaningful? Is that space of any use at all? Or is that space enlightening, uplifting, whatever you want to call it? That is your job.
Serves as intention.
In the process, it will end up looking good, because if the rationale is right, like you said, if the reasoning is right, if your space-making capacity or the ability to make that great space is wonderful, you will end up making an object which will obviously look good. The reverse may not happen. I may end up making an object which looks beautiful from the outside, but the space inside is all screwed.
So good reasoning doesn't equal to...
It may not.
Yes. I want to create a thought experiment. It's like I want to give you a challenge. It's like 1 year challenge. So if you had to teach someone to design a beautiful functioning building in 1 year and their life depended on getting it right, so what would you teach them? Everything else is noise.
No, that's exactly what we're trying to teach them over 5 years, not 1 year.
Yeah. So you have to strip everything away and...
No, it's very difficult to how do you say, put it in a nutshell like that, saying can you teach somebody to do this in 1 year, or even putting any kind of a time frame to it in some ways, basically because what I believe in is right probably as a method may not be right for the other person. Probably it's worked for me, probably it's the method which has delivered good results for me in my practice or in the way I look at design. But for somebody else, he or she has to find his way or her own way in terms of how they would want to perceive or practice their profession, depending on their capacity to look at the issues that are more important to them. For me, probably a few of the issues may be extremely important in the way I look at design. Probably, to put it very crudely, I love my design to be extremely functional, let's say, or I love my design to have extremely bare ideas so that it is brought down to its barest necessities or barest essentials. That may be my approach. May not be somebody else's approach. In somebody else's case, probably, or even a student for that matter, he may have some other priorities in terms of what he or she thinks are extremely important for their process of design.
So it's very subjective.
So it is very subjective, because all you can do for a student is to help them identify the issues which matter to them. They may not be the issues which matter to me.
Wow.
But as a teacher, it's not my responsibility or my job to thrust what matters to me onto them. That is the way it works for me. Fair enough. But I have to help them find what matters to them. And their thought process has to lead them to issues which matter to them. If producing good-looking objects is somebody's cup of tea and they're extremely good at it, then let them pursue it. But in the process, then you have to teach them to help them understand that good-looking object also has to be looked at from the inside to see if it is like that from the outside, what is it doing from the inside? May not be my process of design, but I have to help them discover their process through that questioning or reasoning, if you want to call it that. And as a teacher and a student, if you're saying 1 year or 5 years or whatever it is our responsibility to help each student find that space, or help each student find that issue or that concern which matters to him or her. And fortunately, by the time people come to 5th year, and we have seen it over the last 5 or 6 batches which have graduated, people have at least found a niche or one pin somewhere along the way which says that this is what interests me. After 5 years of being in this course, I think this is what I would want to pursue. And if at the end of 5 years, if the school has managed to help a student find that space where I know exactly where I'm going from now, I think that is what a school's job is.
Success of a school
to
is
help them realize that at the end of 5 years, I know I'm not going to be a great designer, but I know I'm a great manager. Or vice versa, I know I can't be a great designer, but I love writing about architecture or thinking about architecture. So helping people find that space also is what our job is, and not thrust our belief systems on them. Things which, I mean, we are 40 years, 50 years old in the profession or whatever else it is. I mean, our concerns are probably outdated. But as teachers, that is not what you bring to the table. Those are our concerns when we practice, because that is how it works for me. But that is left somewhere back there in your office. When you are in school, you're not thinking about your practice. You're thinking about what is this guy bringing to the table, which is new, which is fresh, which I have never seen before. And in our discussion together, can we find something there which then I will learn probably? Because I also don't know how to do this. And that is the best part of being in education. Because every time you come here, you're actually learning something, not teaching anything.
When you teach to learn.
In the process, you end up learning far more than probably what you teach. So I think that give and take is what this whole system is all about. If you think you've come here to teach, then I think there's a problem there, because then I think you know too much already. And I think this
Can you give me an example for me to visualize this point better? Like, when did you, on the process of teaching, in turn learned? No,
this is an old story. I mean, this is probably 25 years back when we got into teaching. Somewhere in 94, 95, if I'm not wrong. And the whole interest in teaching was basically to be part of a process where, and this came, of course, from our 5 years of education in schools also, in the school also, because there was a huge excitement of being in studio or being in a classroom where sometimes you're not constrained by the real world problems. So you can think of design a little more freely, because real life constraints sometimes tie you down in practice. In a school or in an academic environment, sometimes ideas thrive better because you can strip off the real life constraints and think of it as something which is fresh or something which is not bound by reality at that level. And then where does an idea go? How much can you then push an idea? And that an academic environment allows you phenomenal possibilities. You with your student or with a group of students, and where else, for example, let's say you're sitting in your office and trying to do something. How many ways of doing something can you do individually? You can think of probably a method or a alternative for a particular design problem, probably 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, or 5, 6 alternatives probably you can think of in a normal course of work with the time pressures that are there. You come into a school, you have 40 students, there are 40 ways of doing it.
That's beautiful, right?
And that is your learning, because out of that 40, probably 30 you also didn't think of. You might have thought of 6 or 7 or 10 out of them. But there are 30 out there which you didn't think of. And when you look at them, then it throws up possibility. And then the whole night, all of us sit and discuss about that fellow is doing this and this fellow. And in your mind, you're churning those possibilities and seeing where will they go. Probably the student doesn't even realize what he or she has done. But in your mind, you're already looking at the possibilities of the design and seeing where the design can go if it starts from there.
Wow.
That is your learning process. And then that is the energy which you take back to office then. So it's a give and take both ways. What you learn in office, you come back here and share as experiences. And what you learn here as thinking process, you go back to office and say, why can't I think like that?
So every student's thinking process is a learning of its own.
It's a learning for them, it's a learning for you.
Wow.
Because you can't think of so many alternatives. If I have 80 students in class, there are 80 ways of doing it. How many can I think? It keeps you extremely on the edge. It is extremely enlightening at some level, because every time you come, you go back with a hell of a lot of energy. Because something in that class, either in your own class or somebody else's class you walked into, or you saw something, you saw a set of drawings, somebody's model, somebody's talk, somebody's whatever, and it leaves you extremely excited, saying that, wow, I mean, if somebody can think like that, I mean, where can you take that idea? And where can you push that idea to then? And it throws up phenomenal possibilities.
If a student or somebody is struggling with the constraints like tiny budget, difficult site, conflicting client demands, the kind of project students will really panic about. So walk me through your first 10 minutes of thinking. What questions do you ask? What do you ignore? How do you find the design in the constraints?
You're asking me as a designer or as a teacher?
Both.
So I'll answer it more like a teacher then. Like I said, as semesters go by and as students are going higher up the semesters, the constraints or the parameters for design keep increasing. And like I said, the design making process is involving so many more decisions to be taken based on the parameters that are being introduced to. I'll go back to the corollary of the pen, saying that if I have to design a pen, there are 20 questions or 15 questions I have to ask, and which will then help me design that pen, saying that this constraint, this constraint, this constraint, and if I start ticking off each one of them, probably I know what to do with that pen. Vice versa, which I keep using as an example sometimes in class, is that let's say I told you that this pen belongs to Amitabh Bachchan. How many of these decisions get done just like that then? The minute I say this pen belongs to Amitabh Bachchan, there are 10 decisions already made. It's going to be an expensive pen. It's going to be a nib pen. It's going to be ink. It's going to have a metal body or a extremely expensive body. It'll have a lapel or a pin which probably looks beautiful in his coat. He's a left-hander. He'll probably use it only for autographs. So it doesn't require probably too much ink because he's not probably writing too much with it. So probably 10 decisions already got made. So in every design making process, which is what we also keep telling students, if there are 20 parameters, and as I'm going higher, probably up to thesis, there are probably 100 parameters. Can you give equal weightage to all the 100 parameters? Impossible. As a designer, you will not function. So in every design process, you have to find Mr. Amitabh Bachchan there. You have to find one or two factors which are the key. They hold the whole process together. And in each student's design or each student's method, you're trying to help him find that one or two things which are important for him and which may not be the same for somebody else. For you, probably it is because your design process probably is about geometry or is about something else. So that is the key. Let's see if we can pursue it with that. In somebody else's case, he's talking about sustainability and ecology and water and this and that. Probably for him, the biggest issue is that. The rest of them take a backseat. It's not that you don't solve the rest of it. You'll solve the rest, but that is the key. So in everybody's design process, you're trying to find those one or two things which are important for their design. Help them identify it because most students can't identify what is important to them. So you're helping them identify what is the key which holds their design process together. And once that hits them and they realize, okay, this is what it's all about, then for them, then the process becomes easy. The decision-making process, like I said, once I say it's Bachchan, you know how to design the pen. So once I know it's this, then I know how to go about the rest of the process. So the rest of the parameters then automatically take a backseat. It's like a movie. You have to have a hero. Then there are the sidekicks. Then there is an item number. Then there's a villain. There is this, there is that. But who is this hero? Because the movie is revolving around him.
Right.
So in all this 100 parameters or 20 parameters or 30 parameters that I'm using for design, who is the hero? Who is the, or what are the main concerns or the main issues which are important to you as a designer? So
how do students discover Amitabh Bachchan?
That is the job of the design class. So the
teacher's responsibility.
That is our responsibility. When we come here to teach, let's say 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever it is, walking from table to table, sitting with each student, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, that discussion is basically not to help him design. Because if I start drawing on his paper, that is the way I would do it.
Right.
Because that is my training, that is my experience. And my experience tells me to do it in a certain way. If I scribble it on that piece of paper, then he will just copy it. It takes time because you resist drawing. You resist giving a solution. And you're trying and spending time for him to discover what is there in that which is his. And once he's discovered it, he will do it himself. Then there's no problem. But it takes time for him to discover that. It takes 18 weeks for him to crack that design problem. In the higher semesters, by the time you go to 4th semester, 5th semester, 6th semester, you're doing only one problem over the entire semester. But that one problem takes 18 weeks, 2 days a week, non-stop discussion, which is probably 36 discussions or 40 discussions sometimes, of you helping him find the way by the time he produces something with it. So by the time they come to a jury and they put up their sheets and talk about their design, if it is their own, if it is something which they have done with discovering the issues important to them and figuring out those issues and then designing for it, there's a different confidence with which they speak. But if you have provided the solution, then he will turn to you and say, my teacher told me so. And you don't want that answer. You don't want somebody to turn back to you and say that because my teacher told me so, I did it. Because then there is no confidence in it. Then you're leaving somebody, you have probably missed on what was an opportunity. You saved time by giving a solution. But it didn't help him discover what he was supposed to discover. He'll pass. That's a different story.
Can you help me visualize a story where a student discovered his or her style? And how did you bring it out from the student?
Like I said, it is so subjective and so, how do you say, individual from student to student. For some students, it's an idea which came on the first day itself. I think I want to go this route, and I think this is where I want to be. And they're very clear about what they want right from day one. For somebody else, it is a toil and it's a huge effort, starting from the brass tacks, starting from the bottom, clawing your way to finding something which will make sense at the end of it. For someone, it starts as a process, comes to a point, you found something, and then you kind of plateaued there, saying that after this, I don't know what to think. So each student has his own how do you say, method or madness, if you want to call it. For some it hits right at the beginning, and it's not that every time it will do that. In one semester it probably hit him in the beginning. In the next semester he's struggling. So there's no guarantee that the same student will do the same thing all through his entire career.
But do you remember a story of a student discovering that you still remember?
Well, there are lots of stories. I mean,
tell me your
25 years of teaching, and there are so many stories of projects and students in terms of what they've done. I think the biggest thing with the design process, and which we keep talking in school also, is the fact that I use a very crude example like Mr. Bachchan for the pen. But the point is, every design requires a narrative. Now, in this case, I talked about Bachchan, but then the issue there is what? I need a story. And if I have a story, it helps my decision-making process that much more stronger. I'll give you, since you asked for an example, I'll give you an example.
Yes.
This is a very old example.
Visualize it better, yeah.
This is a very old example, some 15, 20, probably 20, 25 years back. While teaching in my own school in Hassan, there's a batch of students, and they were in their 8th semester. And we had given them a project to design a planetarium in the Bangalore site. It was a triangular site, and to design a planetarium there. And to help them discover a narrative, we asked each one of them to pick up any starting point and say that your design is going to happen because this is your story. So the stories which each student brought out were absolutely fantastic to look at in terms of as a thought process. For example, one student came up with this idea that because it's a planetarium and because it's all that, he says, this is the site, and I imagined that a meteor came and struck the site here. And because the meteor came and struck the site, there's a disruption in the site. The land got deformed, cracks appeared, a ditch happened, a crater happened, and this and that. And his entire design then, because of the narrative starting with this idea of an impact, his entire design progressed from there, carrying that story right up to the end. So there was no form in that building which was perfect rectangle or a perfect circle. Everything was broken. All forms, all rooms, all shapes, all spaces were all broken spaces. Light came in from there were no normal openings. Light came in through cracks in the ceiling, or came in through cracks between the way the ground got disrupted. And he made drawings which had that entire energy of a disruption. There was nothing normal in that drawing. There was no space which was normal in that drawing. No space which was imagined as a space which you are normally used to seeing. Everything was imagined fresh because the story demanded it. The story demanded that something has happened, it's an accident. And in an accident, nothing is straight. Nothing remains straight. Everything is destroyed. How do I draw destruction? And then in that destruction, find some magic. So, and the drawings he produced for that and the models that were done for that are absolutely amazing. So sometimes it's that. I mean, you have to help every student find a narrative. And that narrative could come from anywhere. I mean, it could be from a newspaper article I read. It could be from a movie I saw. It could be from a painting I saw somewhere. It could be a comic strip I read somewhere. or it could be some real world issue which troubled me so much and hence I want to respond to it. So the process is, like I said, the process is still an artist's process.
Right.
You're still digesting information and influences from what is happening around the world. But what you do has a social responsibility. What you do is still to be occupied by people, enjoyed by people. So it can't be your whim saying that I am responding to this as an artist and that's where my responsibility stops. And what happens after that is not my job. You can't leave it there. Because unfortunately or fortunately, what you produce has a social impact.
Wow. Narrative. I've never thought of narrative. How
And
important is
extremely
narrative?
important in any design process to have, which is why I said I use the example of Mr. Bachchan, because he is the narrative in that design process. The minute I introduce a narrative, all your design making or decision making process becomes so
Simpler.
easy. If I'm only responding to constraints or let's say parameters, saying that I have to respond to climate, I have to respond to clients' demands, like you said, cost, I have to respond to site, I have to respond to some time constraints, project has to finish in so and so time. If I'm only going to respond to constraints and parameters, then they are only ticking boxes. And if I say I've ticked 10 out of 10, does it mean it's a great design? It has ticked all the boxes. But there's no soul in it. There's no story. I have everything right. It finished on time. It costed right. It satisfied the client's demands. All the boxes are ticked. But if I don't have a narrative of why is it the way it is, then it's just ticking of boxes. There is nothing in it. Neither does the client have anything to talk about it, nor do I have anything to talk about it, because I can always escape saying that he asked for it, I gave it. That becomes a supply-demand scenario. There was a demand for something, I supplied it. There is no more story to it. If it has to elevate itself from being just, which is the next parameter which I would want to talk about, is as an architect, do we end up becoming service providers, or are we doing more than that?
Important question.
If you're being a service provider, then it becomes a demand-supply story. Somebody has demanded it, I supplied it, I have provided a service. End of story. He has no qualms because he asked for it. I have no qualms, I gave it. So which brings me probably to another corollary which I normally talk to students most of the time, saying that I'm walking down the street. I had a tear in my pant. I need to fix it up immediately. So I walked to the closest shop, a tailor with a sewing machine. I gave it to him. He immediately sewed it, put a patch on it and sent me home. I paid him for whatever he did. What exactly did he do? He did a job. Of what? Of repairing that tear in my pant. For which, what did I do? I paid him for the job that he did. Is there anything more in this? Nothing more. I asked for a service. He provided a service. I am happy. He's happy. Both of us have nothing as a hangover from that transaction. I go my way, he goes his way.
Right.
Job done. It's a job done. I walk down the street, a few more shops. Now there's a store there which says P.N. Rao and Sons, or some tailoring house since 1947 or whatever it is. He's stitching suits, stuff like that. Now I go into his shop. There's a wedding in the family or whatever. And I'm asking him to stitch a suit. What is he doing? He's showing me fabrics, saying that for this occasion, this fabric will probably look good. This color is probably right. For your build and for your color skin, probably this texture will look good. A double-breasted or a single-breasted suit may look good on you. He is now doing what?
Going beyond.
He is advising me. And why is he advising me? And why have I gone to him? I have gone to him to seek advice. I don't know this. I don't know how to go about this. So I have gone to him seeking advice. So what is his advice? His advice is coming as a professional advice. He knows his job, hence he's a professional. And he's been doing this for so many years. So he's a professional giving me professional advice, which I'm gone there to seek. And when I go to a professional, I listen to that advice. Right? Because obviously he knows more than me. Now, is that a job or is it a profession now? He was also a tailor. He stitched my pant and sent me home. That was a job done. I don't expect more from him. He doesn't expect more than what I paid him. But when I walked into this shop, I came here seeking advice. And he gave me professional advice, but still stitched something for me. But then it is coming out of professional experience. design capacity or whatever you want to call it, which then is allowing for a product with something more now which is coming out, not just what the other guy did. I'm walking 3 more shops further down the street and I encounter a store saying so-and-so designer, whatever, and there is a collection which is on display there. Did somebody ask him to put that collection on display? Summer collection or autumn collection of some wear or some whatever it is, it's all on display there and people are going through that display. Some like it, some don't like it or whatever. Who asked him to design it? Was there a client?
No.
No. So why did he do it? He did it because that is his passion. That is what I do. I love designing stuff. And I love working with material. And in this part of the season, I wanted to try out a different material, a different kind of a stitch, or a different kind of a pattern, or a different kind of a color scheme. And I did it for the joy of it. If somebody likes it, they'll buy it. What is that now? Now that's not even professional. Now that is what you call a vocation, not an occupation. It's a vocation, VOCA. A vocation is something which is my calling. This is what I was born to do. And hence I do this. This is my passion. I don't wait for people to ask me to do it. I do it because I love doing it. I paint because I love painting. Nobody asked me to paint. I dance because I love the sheer joy of dancing. I make music because I love making music. Who's asking me to do it? Now that is a calling. That is what I believe I was born to do. Now that is taking it to some other level. Now all 3 of them the same. One is a job. One is a profession. One is a vocation. Now in a school, what are we doing? Are you preparing them for that or this or this? Which is what, I'll go back to your first question, skill. If I'm only producing people with skill, I'm producing job seekers. And that is a disservice I'm doing to the student if I'm going to send him out as a job seeker. Because then I'm not even shown him what are his possibilities. I've only given him a skill and say, go find a job and earn a living. And he believes that's all it is. And that is a huge disservice as an institution if you're going to send out students as job seekers. Come to the next category. Are we then producing professionals? I think as a school, it's our responsibility to produce professionals. Professionals who can give advice. Professionals who are good at what they do and are good at what they have learnt. And have to give advice. I would say it is your responsibility to educate your client. Because if you're a job seeker, you listen to your client. The client said, stitch it like this, you'll stitch it like that. You're not giving him any professional, please don't do it like this, do it like that. That is not my job. You asked me to do it, I did it. That is what a job seeker will do. As a professional, it is your job to educate your client for him to understand what is right and wrong for him. And not just provide tick box solutions. Then you're a professional. Can a school produce somebody with a vocation? It is not a responsibility to produce somebody with a vocation, but it is a responsibility to show you what it is. I'll give you another example. This was my teacher in school who talked about, I remember as a student, a lot of us were confused with this word architecture. I remember first year or second year, and there was this teacher in school called Sharad Padalkar, who had come down from Sweden and had landed in a place like Hassan to come and teach us. And I remember classmates talking about, and most of us, it was a place like in Hassan, and a lot of them even didn't know how to speak English. So this guy comes from Sweden and he's talking big words and big philosophies and stuff like that. And half of it is what half of it? 99% is going over people's heads. So classmates and all of us gathered some courage and they pushed me saying that, go ask him. I said, what am I supposed to ask him? Go and ask him, can you describe what is architecture? I said, okay, I'll ask him. So as the class was coming to an end, I went and asked him, sir, all of us have this big question. Can you describe what is architecture? So he smiled. And he said, let's imagine I blindfold all of you. And I push you into a room. And there is an object in that room which you're supposed to touch, feel or whatever, and then come back and describe it to me. So he says, imagine all of you are blindfolded and sent into a room in which there is an elephant. How will you come and describe the elephant to me? Remember, you're blindfolded. And you don't know it's an elephant.
If I touch tail, I'll say it's like a snake.
So the point is, depending on what I touch or what I hold on to, is my description of that particular object. If I have the tail in my hand, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about the tail. If I have the trunk in the hand, I'll talk about the trunk. If I have the tusk in the hand, I'll talk about the tusk. If I have the leg in the hand, I'll talk about the leg. If I have the texture of the skin, I'll talk about the texture. Nobody can describe the elephant because nobody can touch the whole damn thing. But as a school, it is our responsibility to let the students learn in the 5 years that yes, there is an elephant in the room and it is beyond description right now. It will take you a lifetime to find the description of what that is. But you need to realize that there is a bigger thing out there. And as an institution, it is our job to make students realize that before they walk out. That what you have learned is this much. You've only learned probably holding the tail or the tusk or whatever it is. But realize that there is something big out there. It is your lifelong pursuit to find out what is that big thing out there. It is like our pursuit. We are still discovering what that elephant is all about.
So what does the elephant look like for you now?
I don't know. So which is why I'm saying. So as a school, it's our responsibility to make people realize that you ultimately have to convert that profession into a vocation over a lifetime probably. In 5 years, you can't do it.
Right.
In 5 years, I can only teach you to probably become a responsible professional and what it entails to be a professional. That you go out with a capacity to be able to lead or to teach or to instruct somebody to say that this is what is good for you, this is what is right for you, and not listen to instructions in the demand-supply mode. Because then you immediately demote yourself to being somebody who's only doing a job. You stop being a professional. You start from being a professional and the rest of the journey is now yours. After 5 years, till wherever it takes you, to convert that profession into a vocation, to say this is my calling now, I was born to do this, and to take it to the level where it is now your passion. Now that is your journey. I can only show you up to here and say this is where it is and this is what is out there. That elephant is out there. Now go seek it.
There's something called, students call it evaluation crisis. So architecture students are taught to prize creativity, but then judged by faculty whose aesthetic preferences determine grades. So are we teaching objective design principles or training students to please whoever holds power?
That's always been the case across all architecture schools. A teacher's prejudice in terms of what he or she likes always ends up getting more marks, which is a difficult thing. So what we normally do is we spread the marks over the entire semester, saying that there's progressive marking, saying that if you're working for 16 weeks, at every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, there's a review which is being done sometimes by you or sometimes by somebody else from outside or whatever it is. So every 3 or 4 weeks, a marking criteria is continuously being looked at, which is cumulative. So you're not looking at the final product. The final product has its own weightage of marks. But there's cumulative marking because it means that the student has been consistently working. Otherwise, what happens sometimes, if you're not looking at the cumulative or the process, somebody can come with something out of the blue at the last minute, saying that I got a great idea in the middle of the night and now within 2 days I finished it and I brought it. Now, how do you know it's original? How do you know he's done it? How do you know somebody else didn't do it for him?
Right.
So the cumulative way is easier because you've been tracking it right through. You've seen that first sketch that you did. You saw it, how it progressed over 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You judged it at that time. Then over the next 3 or 4 weeks, again you judged it. So your marks are coming in increments along the way. So the final review, which is being done by, let's say, a set of people who have come from outside or from inside or wherever else it does, also has a certain weightage, probably 25% of the marks. It's not what will kill or make that person. It has also got a certain weightage saying for the final drawings or for your final model or your final presentation, there is X amount of marking that is there. So when I put all this together, your progressive marking and the last one, that is when you get your total thing. So this prejudice which you talk about, where sometimes somebody comes at the last minute and say, oh, this is brilliant, and give him 90. Whereas you know that the process or the method by which that person reached there doesn't deserve that much. So the cumulative marks will have to justify or will add up to a certain thing. And that last thing also has a certain weightage. So even if I get 25 out of 25 there, which is unlikely, but even if it comes there, it will not disrupt the average marking process that is there. So that everybody gets a fair deal. Nobody suddenly cracks it just because somebody liked or somebody is more prejudiced to a particular kind of design. or it falls in line with a particular manner of thinking. Students obviously love their marks. I mean, nobody wants to work saying that I'm working just for the joy of it. At the level of students, it's sometimes very difficult for you to make them believe that nobody in the real world out there is looking at your marks anyway.
Right.
I may walk out with a gold medal in architecture, but I have to still perform outside.
Right.
And when I have to perform outside, that's a totally different story altogether.
Is marks necessary for education?
Absolutely. I don't think I've even asked anybody a degree certificate when they walked into my office.
So then why marks exist in the system?
I'll come back to that. Education across the board, professional all the more so across the country, is aimed at whom? For whom do we make the syllabus, marking system, examination, this, that? Who's our target audience? Is it the guy who will anyway excel? Is it the guy for whom it makes no difference? Or is it the guy in the middle? Most of our education system is designed for the guy in the middle. It is not designed for excellence. It is designed for the average.
Interesting point.
Because it is designed for the average, all these systems have to be put in place. You have to decide what is up, you have to decide what is below, and then what is the average. And it is your job to make that average go a little higher. Because the guy who is good will do it irrespective of you. A guy who is actually good at what he is doing actually doesn't need a teacher. He may only require a little bit of help, and probably he'll do it irrespective of which school he is in, which teacher taught him. Sometimes there are mavericks like that who otherwise also perform. For them, the environment of the teacher actually doesn't matter. You're worried about the average guy, and see that average guy slowly goes up, and in the process pull the guy bottom to also come up a little higher. That is who the education system is designed for most of the time. It isn't, which is why the IITs and IIMs were designed at that point of time when Nehru imagined India as a visionary, or whatever you call, as centers for excellence. Now that's a difference, because they were aimed or designed with curriculum and syllabi where you would produce people who were excellent at what they did. Unfortunately, now with the new universities coming in and the new ways of looking at education, now you're looking at that whole story all over again, saying that you need to produce institutions of excellence and not mediocre or moderate institutions who only cater to getting you a degree, which again goes back to the first equation, saying that if I am moderate, if I'm only mediocre, then I'll only produce the job seeker, not the excellent individual.
Right.
So if you want excellence in education, then you have to introduce or find educational systems which don't require marks. And you have some other way of evaluation where probably the student himself evaluates and says that at this point of time, I don't think I did my best. I can do better. So sometimes we use evaluation systems like that in class, saying that you evaluate your own design, or your classmates will evaluate your design and tell you where they stand. So at the lower semester, sometimes we ask our students to look at what everybody has done in the class, and you give marks for yourself. Looking at whatever everybody else has done, where do you think you stand?
Nice.
And in fact, we were surprised to see that they are more harsh on themselves than we would have been on them. If I would have given a 7 there, they would probably give themselves a 5, saying that I don't think I deserve it. So probably your evaluation systems will have to change, because if you're looking for excellence, then the responsibility is on the student, which I'll take it back to probably one more story like this. See, 90% of education, be it in schools or be it in, it's changing in schools much more rapidly than it is in the higher educational system, is relying on this word called pedagogy. When you use the word pedagogy, it is a kind of learning. Pedagogy is a method of learning through instruction. The word pedagogy is a word which talks about learning by instruction, which means there's a teacher involved. We have relied only on this kind of learning, where there is a teacher and there is a student, and without the teachers say so, there is no learning. Unless that transfer of knowledge happens, only then there is learning, otherwise there is no learning. Unfortunately, or fortunately now, if you take that word learning out of that context and say, what are the other ways of learning? If instruction is one way of learning, what are the other ways of learning? And you'll realize that there are probably 20 different ways of learning.
Right.
With the phone that you have today, do I need to actually instruct a student? He can find that information himself. So finding information, which was our way of learning in our times, where the teacher came to impart information, and to us that was knowledge, because that was the only source of information. Now your source of information is unlimited.
Accessible.
So this ways of learning, I could learn by myself if somebody tells me what I'm supposed to learn. Schools are using that. There's a lot of self-learning happens. A lot of school children go out and do project works by themselves or in groups. There is learning by learning in groups where 4 or 5 people or 6 people do a project. You learn by collaboration. There's learning by looking at your peers.
Observation.
Your seniors come to your class and review your work, help you, because you can probably relate to them better than to a teacher. Because somebody who's just 1 year older than me or 2 years older than me coming and talking to me is probably talking the same language and probably understands my concerns better than probably a teacher can. So probably a peer learning is another way of learning. So if I actually start categorizing, there are probably 10 different ways of learning, out of which instruction is probably one. So why do we put so much importance on that one thing? If the school or if educational institutions can explore all the options of learning, then you have so many more possibilities where then marking then becomes irrelevant actually. Marking is how do you say, is a hangover from the days when the teacher was the only giver of gyan.
Right.
Hence he had the power, because without him that gyan was not possible. Which is why he held on to that power, saying that I will give you marks, or I will judge you, or I will do this, I will do that. Those days are gone. So the power to hold marks or the power to evaluate something is, I think, best transferred to them. Let them figure out their own ways of evaluation.
Right.
Through friends, through peers, through classmates, through so many other ways. I mean, your evaluation is one of the evaluations. There are so many other ways they can be evaluated.
Right. I have overheard architecture students complain about juries. So I have a question on, what does the jury system actually train students for? Is it for thinking, persuasion, obedience, or survival?
The jury system, I think, is by far still the best system for evaluating a design process, simply because you're not actually evaluating somebody there for what he or she has produced finally. You're actually evaluating the process by which he got there. So which is why we insist on students producing even the smallest sketch on a napkin during that jury, saying that where did this idea start from? And then from there, where did you take it? From there, where did you take it? And you want to see the entire thread of thought, saying that this is how it got to where it is. And you're actually evaluating the process. And in the process, you're looking at at what stage did you take this decision? At what stage did you take that decision? How did the design move from here to there, from there to there? You're evaluating the criteria at which decisions were being made during the design process. And you're evaluating whether the decisions made were the right decisions. I'm responding to climate. I have to make a decision at this point. This is the decision I took. Is that the only decision that was possible at that time, or were there other decisions also? And if you chose that, why did you choose that? So the method of a jury or the method of questioning is basically to understand in the student's mind, is he clear of the process that he went through? Or did he do it simply without understanding what he did?
Right.
So if he is clear about the process, he'll talk about it with confidence. He'll know exactly why he did what he or she did at that particular point of time. And that process is what is more interesting than the final product, because the final product probably last minute I fell sick. I couldn't produce the right drawings. Or last minute something happened, my model broke. That is not the criteria by which the thing is being evaluated. Even if the drawing is a little half complete, or even if the model is not 100% right, or it could have been better, you know from the process that this guy can take this somewhere else. Probably it stopped short here because of whatever reasons. So the evaluation criteria is not for the product, it is for the process. And unfortunately, if the juries are looking at the final product as a statement,
that's the wrong way of doing it.
It is not what a jury is supposed to do. You're trying to gauge a student's ability to defend his or her design process, saying that this is how I went through it. And at every stage I took a decision, I am defending those decisions that I took. Unless somebody says otherwise, saying that at this point, probably you could have taken some other decision. And if I agree, then I should be, graceful enough to admit, yeah, probably there was a possibility there. So you help students to understand that in their process. And that is exactly what a jury is supposed to do. And I think even now, that is one of the best processes to evaluate, rather than a one-man panel looking at what you've done. If there are 5 people looking at it, because 5 people have 5 different ways. Sometimes in a jury, the 5 people end up fighting against each other, while the student is simply standing and having tamasha, because somebody is defending the design, somebody is criticizing the design, and they have their own ideological differences with respect to that student's design. And the student is sometimes even unaware of what this discussion is.
Okay.
So it's fun.
That means students should be aware of their own thinking process.
Extremely important. That's what I'm saying.
Like metacognition.
This whole 5 years is only that of helping a student find his or her own space. In the process of 5 years, also find the space in which he or she is good at.
Wow.
Sometimes I'm good at thinking, so let me think. Somebody else is extremely good at doing. So somewhere you have to stop the doer from saying that, I know you will crack this. Give it some time. Given 2 weeks, I know you will produce a great set of drawings and a great set of models. Give it some time. Let's see if you can explore some of the possibilities before you get there. That anyway you will do. We know. We have seen you do it over the last 2-3 years. Keep that aside for some time and let's see if you can try 1 or 2 more possibilities before you actually get to doing. So for the doers, you sometimes force them to think. For the thinker who is overthinking, you have to stop them from overthinking and say, now start doing. Because now it is simply going around the bush. You're not taking decisions.
It's like training for consciousness, no? Being conscious of your own mind and wow.
Because every design process finally, at the end of it is what? Is constrained to a certain extent by the time that is required for that process. Some design processes can go on endlessly. But most design processes are constrained by sometimes time, sometimes some other factor if you want to. I remember a lovely discussion I had. I remember I was in college again. This must be 3rd year or 4th year. 4th or 5th year or somewhere. And this was a conversation with a well-known architect, senior architect at that time, one Mr. B.V. Doshi. And we were in college and again, as usual, somebody prompted me to ask a question and I stood up and asked. So when do you know that your design is complete? I can go endlessly, I can go on. No? So when do I know that the design is finished? And he gave a very interesting answer also. He said, see, imagine a carpenter is planing a piece of wood. He's got a planer. He's got a piece of wood. So he planes it, looks, checks, again planes it, looks, checks. After a certain point, he stops. Now imagine if he continuously kept planing and is not satisfied. What will happen at the end of it? You would have shaved that entire piece of wood and you have nothing left in your hand. So at some time, you have to say, for the purpose that this design is, at this point, enough.
Wow.
Otherwise, you can endlessly keep going on.
What an answer.
So sometimes if somebody is overthinking and simply turning it in his head over and over and over again, you have to stop saying that this process is not going anywhere, because after a certain point, now you have to do. So for the overthinker, you have to force him to do. For the doer, you have to force him to think. So depending on whose capacities or what, you have to nudge them to find, towards the design process where the outcome has to, at the end of it, I have 16 weeks to produce a design. There's a time frame there. So if I have to work within that time frame and do something with this, I need to know when, at what point, does the thinking then lead to some amount of doing? Or does it end up purely as thinking till the end and the doing is very little? Even that is okay, if the thinking is of that quality. And the doing stops at a point where it only suggests that this can actually go somewhere. But the thinking was so great that with that much thinking, only this much doing was possible in this time frame. Give me some more time, probably I'll do some more. But then you have to push and sometimes help students where the thinking is sometimes at a level where you would want them to think so much. And you don't want to stop because the thought process is so great. And there's very little time to do. It's okay. At least suggest that this is what you can do. Maybe not complete, but it at least throws possibilities for somebody saying, with this thought process and this is what he's done, this can actually go miles from here. So you don't want to stop it also sometimes, because that thought process may not come back to the same individual again some other time. In a certain flow, in a certain space, it happens. Some magic happens.
That's beautiful.
And when that magic is happening, you don't want to stop it. You want it to simply go.
Right. Studio culture. So what is the relationship between pain and pedagogy? Like, does suffering equals rigor?
I think suffering is too strong a word. Rigor is a better word.
Yeah.
See, 5 years of architectural education, it's I think rated by most agencies across the globe as one of the toughest courses to do, even compared to medicine and other courses. It is one of the toughest courses to do, and students have to go through hell. I'm no denying that. A lot of work, a lot of rigor, a lot of method, a lot of pain. I agree with that also, especially when you're not getting it. The pain is not in the doing. The doing is physical hardship. Sometimes you hurt yourself. Sometimes it's the sheer act of drawing or making models, which has to be done in a particular time frame. It is painful physically sometimes. But that pain is not as much as the pain when you're not getting it. I'm sitting in front of a blank sheet of paper and I'm not getting it. I don't know what to draw.
And others are getting it.
So that pain is probably more. When you're struggling and you're drawing and you're sketching and somehow you're not getting it. And that is what the studio is all about. I mean, that's the reason why it's called a studio. Because in a studio culture, it is not a classroom like instruction, where a lecturer came, gave a lecture, all of you got the same thing, and then you go and write an exam and all of you answer the same thing and all of you get the same marks. The reason it's called a studio is because in a studio, the teacher is one person who's walking around, but you also have your classmates walking around and seeing what you're doing. So sometimes your classmate came and commented something on your design, or somebody else came and commented something on your design, or somebody from some other studio, a senior walking by walked in, saw what you're doing, and then he commented something. So the studio culture is where you're absorbing all these influences. Somebody is criticizing, somebody is appreciating, somebody is nudging, somebody is advising, somebody is backslapping. Everything is happening at the same time. And that is the fun of that kind of learning, if you want to call it that. Where the teacher is a mentor. He's there. He's like a guide there in the studio to help you in case you're in trouble. But your sources of commentary are from so many other sources. And hence it's called a studio. And that's the only way it can be learnt. It can't be learnt by instruction. I mean, I can't sit under a tree and read out shlokas and ask you to repeat it 100 times till you're mugged it by heart. It doesn't work like that. So the pain is part, I guess, of any creative process. Because you whether it's a writer looking at a typewriter and sitting there, I don't know what to write, it's just not coming today. You call it the writer's block. or an artist who produced some fantastic work over a period of 4 or 5 years and then suddenly goes blank. And nothing is coming to me right now. Sometimes.
That is the equivalent of pain in architecture. Okay.
So any creative process has this mind blocks or these blocks which come along the way. Sometimes it happens in college. It can happen in profession. It can happen at any point in time where you just don't know what to think anymore. Or you don't know what is important to you. Or you don't know whether the process you're taking is the right process.
Architecture students spend like 5 years learning to design building most people will never afford. Meanwhile, 90% of India's built environment, the villages, the chawls, the budget housing, happens without architects. So are we training students for the wrong 10%?
No, which is exactly what I was telling you in the beginning at that time when I said that the country is out there with opportunities to design. This is exactly what I was talking about, which is what we are trying to rectify. I won't say rectify, emphasize as a school is to ground students to understand that there are other realities than the urban realities. The city, yes, is a place where people would want to be, not just for opportunity for work, but also as a way of life. The cities offer a different quality of living. People would want to live in the cities because it has much more opportunities for entertainment, more opportunities for healthcare, more opportunities for education. You would want a life in the city. Nobody is denying that. But then that is not so far away from where the other Tier 2, Tier 3 cities are going right now.
Right.
Most of these opportunities are also coming there now. So this misnomer of the architect being somebody who only does the good things in life or can only design for the privileged is slowly dissolving. So you look at cities like Nasik, you look at cities like Coimbatore, you look at all the small towns in Kerala. There are practices, there are architects who are now working in a lot of small towns and upcoming towns doing some fantastic work.
Nice.
That is where as a school, we are hoping most of the kids would go. And one of the reasons for putting the school in Mysuru was that. We wanted people from the hinterland to come and join the school, not people who are only in the cities. So our ratio of students is also 1/3 urban 1/3 peri-urban or semi-urban, and 1/3 actually from smaller towns, hoping that with their education and with their background that they pick up from here, they would go back to where they came from and create practices and create opportunities in their own environments. And in today's time and today's space, it is possible. In our time, it was not. Though we came out with dreams like that, but at that time, the opportunities only existed in the cities. Today, it is very easy to go out there and find those opportunities because most of these towns and cities are growing, and there's huge opportunity for design. So this qualification of the architect being only a provider for the rich, I think it will slowly dissolve.
Can you give me example of these interesting examples you mentioned, like architects settled in Coimbatore, Nasik?
Oh, lots of practices. There are lots and lots of practices.
One example that stood out for you?
No, there are. I mean, I have friends who I can't straight away name their practices, but there are friends who are in Nasik. At least 3 or 4 friends whom I myself have called to give talks. They have come to college to do juries here. There are friends in small towns like Satara in Maharashtra. There are friends from Calicut in Kerala. All growing towns, tier 2, tier 3 towns, who have very good practices and doing interesting work in their towns and cities beyond just making great, big, good-looking houses.
Like how do they look like?
Some are engaging with the local municipalities, trying to do public works, town halls, panchayat offices, some public infrastructure, bus stands. There is a lot of work. Like I said, if you're looking for design to make a difference, there is a lot of work out there.
Right.
And a lot of these government agencies are also willing to engage with architects if you're willing to go and search for those jobs. So as part of our curriculum, we have these odd semesters where there is what we call the ground connect. So semester 3, which is the second year, the students go and spend a week in a village. You actually go and stay in the village. If there are 40 students, we have a class of 80, they go to 2 villages. 40 go to one village, 40 go to another village. You stay for 7 days or 10 days in the village, studying the village to understand how people live, what materials of use for construction, what kind of crop do they grow, understand economics, understand social structure, understand festivals, understand lifestyle, understand, measure and draw the way people build in the villages. To actually measure and draw them to what kind of houses, what kind of material and stuff like that, to sensitize people to the idea that design is not always done on paper. People out there are also doing design without actually designing. It is coming out of their culture, it is coming out of their lifestyle, it is coming out of, let's say, a hand-me-down from generations, if you want to call it that.
Tradition.
Right? So there is design coming in those ways also. So learn that also. Learn how people, how like you said, how people design without designers, and how sometimes they do it so well. So that is their study in the 3rd semester. So, and then you come back to the studio, make drawings, like where you're sitting in the afternoon there, behind you, those drawings where KP was sitting were actually done in a village, drawing streets of that village, drawing the houses in the village. That model which was there was of a house in Himachal Pradesh, where they actually spent 10 days, figured out the method of construction, came back and made a model of that entire house of how they build in the hills, in the Himalayas. So the whole idea is that design is not always this so-called up-down or top-down approach. Sometimes you have to go bottom-up. You go and learn how people are doing design, like you said, without designers. And that is also a learning. And sometimes it comes out of pure, common sense sometimes, of responding to criteria. The Himalayas are forever shifting, there's some trembling happening, earthquakes happen. How do you build in an environment like that? And they have found their own ways of doing it. Learn from it. So 3rd semester they do that. Then 5th semester, which is the beginning of the 3rd year, they go to a town. From a village, then you move to a town. Now, town has its own complications. A town has cultural issues. Some towns are religious towns. Some towns are commerce towns. Some towns are educational towns. So each town has some peculiarity or something, just some characteristic. Learn from that. How does it influence the way they think about design? Sometimes it's a culturally, let's say it's a temple town. Let's say I went to Udupi. Now, because there's a temple and because the temple is so important to the town, there is a certain kind of a character that the whole town develops because the temple is so important. And the kind of people who come, the devotees who come there, the people from outside who come there, the locals, the way they react to that temple and their own lifestyle that happens there. Learn from that, and then you learn how to respond to design when something so important is happening there. That becomes a catalyst for design. And by the time they come to the final year, then you go to a city. Then you spend a week in the city. It could be Bangalore, it could be Mysuru, it could be wherever. And then look at what characters or what factors shape your decision-making process when I'm designing for a city. Because then that's that much more complex than when you went to a village,
Right.
when you went in. So these are ways in which you're forcing students to look at design in contexts which are beyond the so-called designer context, and learn from methods and approaches which are already there.
Just through observation.
Just by observation, just by learning, just by sketching, just by drawing, repeating, copying sometimes. And that becomes a method by which you start appreciating that all design sometimes is not always done out of the sky. There are methods and there are ways in which people have learned to do this over the years, by practice, by elimination, by mistakes, and then you fine-tune till you get it right. And sometimes it takes hundreds of years to get it right. So you can't discard something like that easily. No? So this is a way of, like I said, to sensitize students to the fact that if you go out there, there is so much more to do. So this 1 week in a village or 1 week in a town or 1 week in the city or whatever are ways for you to make the students aware that there is so much as a designer if you go out there to do, find opportunities.
Right. So most architecture students come from upper middle class families who can afford 6 years with no income. How can architects design for all of India when architectural education itself is a filter that excludes most of India? Is there a way to
Are you asking, is it an expensive course?
Yes.
I don't think it is that expensive a course. Compared to what other courses are right now, how much a student ends up paying for studying medicine, let's say, or how much a student ends up paying for management. I don't think an architecture student pays that much. To call it a very expensive course, for example, a student coming in from a CET background, a government seat to our college or to any college, if you have got a government seat, a student is paying, I think if I'm not wrong, 1.5 lakhs per year. A kindergarten student right now in nursery or first standard, just check how much they pay.
Right.
It is not the expense that is important right now. In fact, at one time it was. In fact, when we were studying, I would say, architecture was a little expensive, a little elitist, because you have to find your own model making material and your own tools, and you have to travel and you have to do so many other things, which at that time was actually unaffordable. Today it's not that bad. As an institution, we also help students to sometimes tide over this crisis, saying that
like scholarships.
There is an endowment fund. So there's a faculty will figures out if sometimes it's a cost for a trip which somebody can't bear, or if it's a cost of stationery which somebody can't bear, or it's sometimes the cost of stay which is too expensive, because most of the students have to stay sometimes away from home. So the college helps students tide over these issues.
It depends on the college to college.
No, these things automatically become part of the system. There are few. It's not that there are hundreds of students with these kind of demands.
Right.
There are a few of them, and those few you can definitely help.
AI can generate dozens of design options in seconds, optimized for cost, sunlight, structure, code compliance, tasks that take students weeks to learn. If the technical skills we teach for 6 years can be done by AI in 6 seconds, what exactly are we teaching students that won't be obsolete before they graduate? I think we have dealt with this, but
I'll repeat the same thing. I mean, it goes back to the same example which I had quoted earlier, saying that when we were studying, there were no computers. Forget software. There was no hardware also. There were no computers also. But then it's a skill. It's a new technology. It's a skill. You learn the skill. So I'll club two examples here. One is the skill example of new technology, new hardware, new software, and what it brings to the table. And the second, which we already talked about, is saying that as an architect, it is your job to design the emptiness inside. It's your job to design the space inside, which will make people happier, comfortable, uplifted, or whatever you want to call it. And the designing of the space, AI is not going to do for you. If you ask it 10 alternatives to make it look better, it will probably throw 10 alternatives of that in a different material, in this material, in that material, or whatever. It doesn't help you make that space better. For that, you are still required. Because how that space needs to feel is only my brain which can do that. AI can't do that. And to help me visualize that space, I can use a tool like AI, absolutely no problem. Like how I sketch or how I make a model and see what it looks from the inside. How is that space going to look from the inside? Is the volume right? Is the light coming in from the right angle? Am I looking at the right view? Is it oriented to the right direction? Where does the rain come from? Where does the sun come from? Where are the trees? Where's the landscape? How does this volume respond to the landscape? These are ideas which I'm sketching or doing, and if I want to visualize it better, for me to be sure that this is exactly what I want, I'll definitely use AI as a tool for me to visualize that better. But as a visualization tool, as a tool for me to grapple with the ideas that I'm dealing with in the process of space making. But that space making is coming from my head. The visualization is a technology or is a tool which I can definitely use. Nobody is stopping you from.
So you mean skills will become obsolete, imagination would be
Imagination
is
still required, which is why I'm saying, no, as an architect, please don't forget, or the students also we keep telling, please don't forget, it is not your job to be engaged with the making of a beautiful object. Your job is to make that beautiful space inside. Because people live in spaces, they don't live in objects.
We can take a break.
Absolutely.
Part 2, story of Wadiyar Centre for Architecture, a different kind of experiment. So I want to hear this story on what prompted taking action on this idea, and from everything, the ideation to execution, the process you guys went through to start an institute like this, and what made you start something like this when there are a lot of institutes out there.
It's a pretty long story. I'll try and keep it as short and simple as possible. It started with this idea that all of us wanted to be in academics at some level or the other. And all of us, there are 11 of us in this venture, all of us have done our bit as far as teaching goes at some part in our careers. It happened in schools in Bangalore, different schools of architecture in Bangalore. I, for example, was a part of the Bengaluru Institute of Technology in 94, 95. Then 95, 96, 97, I was part of SIT Tumkur. Then 97, 98, 99, up to 2000, I was part of my own school in Malnad College of Engineering at Hassan. And jurors in so many other institutions and stuff like that. One thing which was common as an experience, which all of us felt while teaching in these various institutions, was at some point you would hit a blank wall when it came to either systems or whether it came to sometimes the method of teaching, sometimes it came to evaluation. There was always a roadblock which you would hit at some point of time, because of which you would feel the frustration, saying that while working in the system, there is always this lacuna which you somehow can't fill. And there was always this complaint that if only this didn't exist, or if only you could circumvent this problem, or if only we could do something else, or why can't we do what we want to do? And somewhere in the year 2010, there was this opportunity that 8 or 10 of us got together to come and teach in a school in Mysuru called the University School of Design. That experiment lasted for about 3 years, 2010 to 2013, if I'm not wrong, where again you encountered a roadblock with the university and the management, not the management, the administration who ran the college. At which point we were kind of forced to reconsider our engagement with that school, and we had to quit. Again, this same issue came up, saying that why is it that we always hit this issue with how the system operates, and somehow can't circumvent it. And if you really want to do something interesting, what is it that is stopping us from doing it? And one thing that finally came as a realization of that entire process was the fact that we are not in control. Somebody else is in control, and that somebody else is probably making decisions which sometimes are contrary or sometimes not in keeping with the academic rigor that one would want to kind of put in place in institutions like this. And because you're not in control, you have no say in the matter. So that led to one more realization, that if you actually want to make a difference, then you will have to jump into that water and swim. I mean, you can't be on the sides and keep complaining all the time that the system is bad, or the administration is not right, or things are not going well. And what can you do about it? So the only solution was you have to get your hands dirty. If you have to set things right, the only way is to get your hands dirty. So when we quit that institution in Mysuru, which was, if I'm not wrong, in October of 2013, we decided that before we part ways, there were 8 or 10 of us that time, and before we part ways and again go back to some institution in Bangalore and start teaching, each one of us in different institutions, it will not make much of a difference, because 1 or 2 people in an institution can't actually make the difference that one would want to make. I mean, we were 10 in this institution and we actually made a difference over a period of 3 years. Unfortunately, I had to give it up. So we said, if we actually have to do something in this field, then it has to be as a group, it can't be as individuals. So let's not disband the group. Let's not let this group go to waste. So in 2014, we set up a trust called Design Foster, which was an expansion for Design Foundation for study, teaching and research. With little knowledge at that time that where would this trust actually head. The idea was that it was a loosely formed association of 10 or 11 people, and the whole idea was we'll just restrict it to the people who were teaching at that time in USD, and let's start with that and let's see where it goes. So all of us who left were with the members of the trust, and as luck would have it, after 9 of us were from the same institution. We all studied in this school called this Malnad College of Engineering at Hassan, and we were all graduates from the same school. And we have been friends since, ever since we left the school. So there is a certain synergy, a certain like-mindedness, a certain way of thinking which was very common to most of us. From that came this idea that, okay, trust is formed, and we kept quiet on it for almost 3-4 months, from January till probably, I would say, April, May. And then somewhere along the way, we decided that let's start a school of architecture. A very ambitious proposal at that time, given the fact that most of us were from small offices, 5 or 6 people in an office, and not, I wouldn't say
deep-pocketed.
Yeah, deep-pocketed individuals in that sense. So where would the money come from was the last thing in anybody's mind at that time. It was just this great idea that let's start a school of architecture, and unanimously everybody agreed that it will not be in Bangalore, or it will be in Mysuru. Reason for that being the conversations that would happen while traveling also to Hassan when we were teaching in Hassan, or while traveling to Mysuru when we taught for 3 years in Mysuru, was that every time you travel, there would be this wonderful conversations which would happen while traveling of what you would do when you'd go to school. We would talk about each other's subjects in each other's classes, each other's students, and when you're coming back from the travel, of what happened during those 2 days when you were teaching in that particular school. Which student did what, and whose design gave you a big high, and where do you see possibilities with somebody else's design, and fantastic conversations. And those conversations were what we were trying to somehow, keep intact. And that would be possible only if you travel. Bangalore, all of us have our practices, and we all have experienced this in Bangalore, that when you're teaching in Bangalore, your mind is already half off at the time of wondering what you will be doing next when you go back to office. There is a site visit, there is an office to go back to. So you're not fully there when you're teaching. But every time you leave Bangalore to either travel to Hassan or to Mysuru or any of these places, within the first half an hour, your mind is already disconnected. You know that for the next 2 days, Bangalore doesn't exist. In our radars, in our minds, in our thinking, what will the office do? Nothing exists for the next 2 days. And that space was so beautiful and so important for all of us, which is why all of us instantly agreed that Mysuru would be the place. One reason was very personal or very selfish, was that it gave us the space to actually be and do what we wanted to do without thinking of what was happening back in Bangalore, either at the residential front or the home front or the office front. On a larger level, Mysuru is also an educational town, a sleepy town, a slow town, does not have the urban pressures that a city like Bangalore or any of the larger cities have. So it's a great environment for students to, spend time. And a subject like this actually requires that little immersion. It requires people to spend time. I mean, to be able to be and do stuff which they are totally immersed in, and not being distracted by urban pressures, if you want to call it that. You see things in Bangalore where students are mostly already planning what will happen after 4 o'clock. There's a movie to go to, there's a mall to be in, there is some other place to be in, some party, some event. You already have your plan structured for what would happen after school hours, whereas Mysuru doesn't have that many opportunities. So to a very large extent, it becomes a place where, other than the subject and other than the school, you hardly have anything else to do. And it's a perfect environment for a course like architecture. So that was this other reason for being in Mysore. Now, where the story goes from there on is that we were searching for land. Fortunately, we got in touch with Her Highness Srimati Pramoda Devi Wadiyar, the Queen of Mysore, and she was gracious enough to be a partner in this venture. Without the support of their trust, the SJUT trust, I don't think the story would have gone further. Where we are today, a huge debt is indebted to that gesture, which when we asked her for land to start this school, and she was gracious enough to admit that there was this property in the middle of the city which had these old buildings, and if you can do something with this and start something here, it would be great. And we instantly fell in love with this place. Though there were these 2 existing buildings here, and we were supposed to build around it, and to be in the heart of the city, which took away a lot of pressure, because then we didn't have to think about hostels, we didn't have to think about commute if we are slightly on the periphery of the city. We had tried all that before, and none of that worked. And this kind of tied all these loose ends together. And quickly we set in motion the whole method of how to go about starting a school of architecture, which was obviously permissions from the Council of Architecture at Delhi and affiliated to the Visvesvaraya Technical University at Belgaum. So the permissions for that, the running around for all that, it took its time. All said and done, within a year, by 2015, we had already started. How those things happened, the people who came forward to help, innumerable people. I mean, one can't recount the number of people who have helped in the process of putting the school together. Right from finance to help to getting permissions to lots of people did lots of things. It is one of those cases where you say that if there is a will and if there is a vision, then the universe kind of conspires to see that that vision somehow gets fulfilled. I mean, this is one of those classic examples of that. One doesn't know where the help came from. We didn't sometimes even know the people who offered to help at that point of time. But with all those little gestures and people going out of their way to make things possible, this dream or this vision became a reality in a short span of a year. By mid-August 2015 was when the idea was floated, and by August 2015 we already had our first set of students walking into the college.
Wow.
It was a phenomenal 1 year within which a lot of these things fell into place. And like I said, thanks to so many people who had been instrumental in this entire process. The making of the school itself, in terms of what was it? So there are two factors in this. One is, given this opportunity now that, okay, now you can stop cribbing about the system, you can stop cribbing about why you can't perform or why you were curtailed or why you were held back. Now here is an opportunity where it is yours. Now what will you do with it?
Before that, what were you guys trying to fix in the system that couldn't be fixed from inside?
No, I was getting to that. Okay. So like I said, there are two aspects to this school. One is, of course, the school as an idea, and two, the school as a reality, as a physical infrastructure in place to put the school together. The school as an idea. The school as an idea was debated extensively in terms of, number one, will the school actually have a philosophy? Because a lot of schools at that point of time ran with very strong ideologies, saying that this school runs with a particular method or a particular ideology. So this was debated extensively, saying, should this school actually have some kind of an ideology based on which then the school runs? And after extensive discussions, we realized that given the time we live in today, and given the variety that is possible, and the space within which so many ideas are being tossed around, to stick to one or to commit to one and say this is the only way it will work, we realized what would be a foolhardy thing to do. So it was at a very early stage, after quite a bit of discussion, it was decided that it is best left open-ended. I won't say open-ended, where people will find their own way. People will find their own methods and their own directions, as long as the method is clear. And when I say method, the method in this case was the rigor of practicing something with a persistence and with a perseverance, which the students also had to have, and the teachers also had to have. That was essential. That was a must. Freedom of expression in terms of what each one would bring to the table was left, because all the 11 of us also have practices which have independent thoughts of process, and all 11 of us don't think similarly. Mm-hmm. So when we realize that the differences amongst the 11, then we have to accept the differences amongst the rest who will come also. So it was a natural progression that if the 11 of us can't agree on something one, which we all subscribe to as saying that this is the only way of going about it, and we accept that all of us are bringing different things to the table and they're equally good, then we also accept the other people who would walk in and probably become a part of this experience, that what they bring will also be of equal value. So the idea that diversity has its own advantages and has its own possibilities was a given at a very early stage in terms of what this school would actually be. The second thing was, are we coming here as 11 people who are experienced with 20 years or 30 years of practice and probably 10, 15 or 20 years of teaching, as people who know what architecture is, as people who can profess what architecture is, and hence are qualified to teach this thing or teach this subject? Is that where we come from, or is there some other standpoint? A common agreement which came again fairly early in the game was the fact that, number one, we are not academicians. And let's accept the fact that we are practitioners indulging in academics. There's a huge difference. If we were academicians, then we would be serious academicians. We are not serious academicians in that sense. We are practitioners who dabble in academics for the sheer love of it. So that difference had to be realized, that we are not serious academicians in that sense. So if we are not, then I don't think we have the right or the ability to qualify ourselves as people who can actually teach this subject. Mm-hmm. Because to imply that we could teach it means that we know it fully. I'll go back to the earlier analogy which we had talked about. Do we know this elephant in the room fully? And even after 30 years in the profession or 40 years in the profession, I don't think any of us are qualified to answer that question. Are we actually in a position to define this elephant in totality? We are still groping in the dark. We still have bits and pieces together. And if that is what we are as a group, then the best thing that we could bring to the table was we could create a space where, like us groping in the dark, learning about this subject, can we also make other people party to the same process? So in simpler words, instead of naming it a school of architecture where you teach architecture, can we then imagine a school of architecture where all of us are learning architecture? So that turns the tables on its head in some ways, saying that if all of us are seekers or all of us are here to learn this subject, then technically nobody is a teacher. Somebody is a little ahead or somebody is a little behind in that sense of whatever it is, but all of us are still seekers. All of us are still learners. So whether it is the teachers in the college or the students in the college or us in the college, we are all here to learn this subject. Some of us may have started this learning process a little earlier in life. Some of them are just joined now. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we are all in the same boat doing the same thing. So that was one thing which was a given, in the fact that if you then start off an institution saying that it is a place for learning rather than a place for teaching, then it turns lot of things on its head, because then nothing is a given and nothing is perfect in that sense, because then every time you try something, you may fail. There's no guarantee that you will hit it right. And if you fail, it's okay, because that's the whole process of learning. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. So even as teachers, sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't get it right, sometimes. It's okay. And that's, you stumble, you fall, and you get up and you walk and you start all over again. So as long as the mindset can continue to retain that ability to get up and learn every time you make a mistake or every time something goes wrong, I think it is all right. Over the last 10 years that the school has been in existence, the school has provided opportunity to teachers, to students, and most of all, I would say to all of us, a platform where each one of them at their own level is seeking platforms or spaces or opportunities where they could learn something. So the teachers are pushed to attend seminars and write papers. Right now, we also have a publishing house in the campus. We have published our first book. So people who are interested in academics from the research method, they are free to pursue that. There are professional competitions being held by the school for not just students, for professionals from other disciplines as well, like the Onion Project, which is a mapping exercise which is open to students and to professionals to participate in. So each teacher or each group of teachers, depending on what their interests are pursuing their own line of thinking in terms of what would they want to learn from an environment like this, or what would they want to pursue as their own interests in this thing, which will then somehow feed back into the learning process of either the students or us. I mean, for us also sometimes it's a brand new experience when teachers come up with some of these projects, because we can't think of these projects, and when they propose this and they want to go ahead with this, I mean, it's a lovely experience, because it's a great learning experience to see what comes out of these competitions sometimes, or what comes out of these research papers, or what comes out of an exhibition of works, or sometimes speakers who come from outside and speak on subjects diverse from architecture or allied subjects which are sometimes miles apart, but great learnings to take from. So as a platform, the school was imagined as a place where not just students and teachers, at times even the city would participate in. So the doors of the school are open to cultural events, to workshops, to exhibitions where the whole city sometimes comes in. I mean, there are performances in the courtyard here where we're sitting, where people from the city are welcome to come and participate in these programs or be part of these programs. So the idea was, can the environment then somehow be provocative enough for everybody to be a part of it? And in the process, everybody learns something. What, we don't know. As long as the interaction is possible, some learning will happen. So at the level of a philosophy, or at the level of what the school should be, that was what was looked at. Now, as a physical infrastructure, when one went about, let's say, putting up this thing together as an institution or as a school, we talked about constraints. We talked about parameters which one has to somehow, respond to when you're designing. And one of the parameters was the fact that there were these three existing buildings, the buildings which you're seeing behind us, which already existed on this campus, and they're almost 100-year-old buildings. So how do you respond to that which is already there, and then put something there which is new in some sense? And also to respond to this whole idea that if it is an environment for learning and not an environment for teaching, then what would that environment be?
That was a narration.
So the story or the narration in this case, as far as the making of the school goes, runs on two parallel tracks. One is a track which is trying to address the old. And when I say the old, it is not the old buildings itself. It is also the old as an idea. Because these buildings were put up by the erstwhile king of Mysuru 100 years back for teaching students from the Ursu community. So the building on the right was their boys' hostel, and the building on my left is the vocational training center. So these are buildings done 100 years back, again with education in mind, for a community of students. So the place already had an educational character, if you want to say that. And here we are, nobodies, novices, first-time applicants, if you want to call it that, building on a place where the king of Mysore had already done so much. I mean, he's credited with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, the Mysore University in Mysore. I mean, there is the Maharaja's College, the Maharani's College, the Yuvaraja College. So many institutional buildings done by the royal family, for which, I mean, you can't owe them enough. And here you are sitting next to them nobodies in some sense, trying to stand in a way almost next to those personalities and trying to make a presence felt in some ways. So how do you do that? How do you compete with that body of work? A body of work which has impacted the whole state, which has affected millions of lives in terms of education and universities and premier institutes and stuff like that. And here you are trying to do one small thing for about 200, 300 students, one department. And you're trying to jostle for space next to such massive achievement. So one narrative was, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that kind of heritage or that kind of legacy, history, if you want to call it, legacy that you want to call, and stand next to it and not compete with it? So one narrative was a narrative of humility, saying that if you want to stand next to this kind of a solid achievement, you can only stand next to it extremely lightly, in a manner where you are there but you are not there. So the buildings that we put on the left, on either side of these existing buildings, were imagined in steel, were imagined in materials which are absolutely, in some ways, immaterial, which would not compete with the solidity of the existing buildings.
Wow.
So the solidity of the existing buildings are these masonry buildings, thick walls, plastered, solid buildings which have been around for 100 years. So the only way you could compete with them, or wrong word, not compete with them, to stand next to them would only be in humbly standing as somebody who's making baby steps in the same direction. So the choice of material, the method of detailing it, and the method of looking at the whole thing was to make the new buildings almost dissolve into space, that they don't even make their presence felt.
Wow, it feels that way.
They're almost lost. You don't even notice them. You only notice the buildings which were there. That was narrative one, in terms of how do you stand next to something like that. Narrative two came from the fact that if it was a school of learning and not a school of teaching, then I have to learn myself as a designer in terms of how do you make the spaces which are spaces for learning. The classrooms will still be there, the corridors will still be there. But then can all those boundaries dissolve? Can the wall dematerialize and become an open space? Can the classroom become a part of an outside space? Can a classroom spill out from an inside to an outside space? Can teaching happen in spaces between buildings? Can teaching happen in an indoor space? Can teaching happen in an in-between space? Can two classrooms join together? Can the function of a space change as time goes by? So the whole idea was, if learning is what this environment was supposed to be, like we talked about earlier, there are various ways of learning. So if you say various ways of learning, if learning by instruction is one of them, learning by doing is one of them, learning from peers is another, learning as a group is another, then learning environment also should have that much variety. Why should the learning environment be fixed to just a classroom? So if I'm comfortable in a classroom, so be it. If I'm comfortable in the corridor, so be it. If I'm comfortable in a space outside the classroom, so be it. If I'm comfortable below the tree, so be it. So if the variety of learnings can change, then the environment for that kind of learning also needs to change. So the environments also need to be different. I can learn in the open, I can learn in a shaded space, I can learn in a covered space, I can learn in a closed space. That option also the students need to have, or the teachers need to have, in terms of where would you want to learn. And does the school then give you those opportunities of learning in all these kind of spaces, which then opens up the whole factor that you blur the boundaries between what is outside and inside. You blur the boundaries between different activities. Sometimes a teaching space moves into a conference. Sometimes a conference moves into an exhibition. You don't know what is happening when, in which time of the year. And these functions also keep changing. So that was the environment, though in reality it looks like simple boxes. But then the idea that these boxes can do different things at different times of the year, or different times of the day, or different seasons of the year, and allow for different ways of creating learning experiences, was narrative two.
Adaptation.
So with these two narratives, the school was built. The idea that not all learning is within four walls. There's a huge amount of learning that can happen if you knock those walls off.
Wow.
And when I say walls, it's not just physical walls, it's also metaphorically. Sometimes these walls also exist in the mind.
Nice.
So you also need to knock those walls off. When a student looks at the campus, even without saying it, he is questioning the fact, what is a wall? What is a door? What is a window? You're questioning every element of building, because sometimes those elements are there, sometimes they disappear. If I close all the doors, it becomes a wall. The first floor right now looks like a wall. But if I open it up like how it is below, then the wall disappears.
Open space.
So you don't know what is a wall, what is a door, what is a partition, what is inside, what is outside. I can do anything with this building as long as I want to create the kind of environment in which I want to learn. That was narrative 2. In terms of, one is how do you deal with the old or deal with the heritage, deal with the legacy. And 2 was how to create an environment which is conducive to learning, not conducive to teaching. Hence, it is free to the students for them to use these spaces the way they want. If they want to make models here, they want to dance here, they want to sing here, you're welcome to do whatever you want. That is where the imagination of the school came from. Thanks to somebody like Manjunath, a brilliant structural engineer, friend of mine. We've worked together ever since we started our careers together. And because of that synergy or that understanding of each other, can sometimes even do things or can anticipate things even having not said them. Our thought processes at sometimes are so similar and sometimes are also dissimilar. But then there is a synergy with which that thought process sometimes, leads to a result which is conducive to both our lines of thinking. So without his help or without his absolutely creative mind in putting this entire steel structure together, because that is also learning. None of us had built in steel before.
Yeah.
All our practices for 25, 30 years have been brick, concrete, and the standard type of building. This was the first time where all of us were dealing with steel.
Even I was amazed by it.
So and to deal with steel and the choice, like I said, the choice of steel was basically to see that how lightly can you build, how quietly can you sit on the ground without disturbing it too much, and keep most of the existing trees and the existing landscape and all the existing buildings, all of them intact without disturbing the ambience of what was already there, and only add to it and not take away from it. So that is where this school kind of came together in that sense. 10 years of looking at it in hindsight now that 10 years have gone by, I think it has done a great job, both in terms of as a place, in terms of what we thought of it as a place where a certain kind of learning would happen. The students have done well, 5 batches have graduated, and in whatever fields they have chosen to be in. Some of them have gone on to do masters, some of them have started their own practices, some of them have gone into allied fields. There is a certain confidence with which they speak now when you sometimes bump into them after 2 years, 3 years and stuff like that. And that confidence, they all credit it to the fact that they learned in the school. And which I think is a huge confidence booster, that probably something along the way we did do right. There are a lot of things which now in hindsight, when you say 10 years have gone by, are yet to be done. In terms of where else can this school move forward to, there are a lot of areas of exploration still left untouched. Like you said, AI is a field which one needs to still explore. Empowering the faculty to pursue newer ideas and newer ways of thinking and newer ways of teaching which are already there. How much can we let that go further? How much more do we interact with other institutions within the state and sometimes within the country
Collaboration
to work out collaborations? So that there's a huge,
and not just one field. Collaboration with engineers. Collaboration with
so the whole gamut of things. I mean, now that we have kind of slowly gained confidence that okay, we're here to stay. 10 years have gone by. Now is the time, I think, where we actually need to open up and look at the possibilities that exist from where we are right now. Like at the time when we started, it was from zero ground. Now, hopefully, we're at a slightly better position than when we were 10 years back. From here, the possibilities look endless in terms of whether it is collaborations with foreign universities, collaborations for our students to be exchange students with universities abroad or elsewhere in the country, collaborations with other schools of architecture with similar lines or different, sometimes radical ways of looking at architecture. Those collaborations could only be beneficial, mutually beneficial to all of us. And those are avenues which we're trying to explore right now.
So I looked at the website. So there's one term which caught my attention, which was experiential learning.
Which is basically, like I said, when you say there are different ways of learning, one of the ways of learning is learning by doing. It goes back to, you ask any of us, what are the best memories you have of anything? Maybe schooling, maybe childhood, maybe growing up and stuff. And you'll always remember that when you actually did something, made something or did something, or traveled to some place or visited some place, saw something, the experience of actually having done there, been there, seen something, can't beat the experience of, let's say, learning about that place through a book or seeing a movie or seeing a picture or doing something else. Being there and having done it is something else altogether. And that has a power of retention, a power of understanding, and a power of observation much higher than any of the other ways. So when you say, when you use the word experiential, one is looking at creating those experiences during the 5 years that you're studying here, where those experiences become memory, and that memory then has this power to retain. The power to retain learnings which happened there. For example, when we travel, the students have these travel trips once in second year, once in third year, or also when they're doing their surveys in the villages and the towns and stuff. The faculties are always there. And though sometimes some of the trips are fun trips, you're always there to help them see stuff when they're seeing buildings, sometimes old, sometimes new, sometimes contemporary, to help them understand stuff when they're there, or what is it that they're actually seeing. And to make that distinction between what is seeing and what is observing. So when I stand there and probably sketch something, in the process of making the sketch, I probably observed something, as against when I took out my cell phone camera and clicked a picture. That picture probably I'll never see again. But when I stood there for 5 minutes and actually sketched something of that got retained in my system. Because I observed something in that 5 minutes.
And you put effort in.
There is an effort. So that effort is what you call experience. I experienced something in that moment. And that experience becomes a memory. And that memory then has the power to somehow retain itself as some kind of a learning. With students also sometimes we call it, like we talked about earlier, of these three terms, job, profession and vocation. There are other three terms which I always look at is information, knowledge and wisdom. So what do you look at in a school? Information was what education was for when we were studying.
Pre-internet, pre-computer.
The school or the place of education was a place where you got your information from. Because there was no other source of information. Unless you went to a library and hunted for books, the only source of information was when the teacher actually came and wrote something on the blackboard. And then you would copy that blindly and reproduce it and write exams and stuff like that. Information was the key that time because that was a scarce commodity. And that was only held by people who knew it. So the teacher was the only source of information at that point of time. Cut to today, information is something they already have. Information is on their phones. Information is all over the place. There are websites, there is internet.
Overloaded.
You have an excess of information right now. Information is not what the school is about or a teacher is about today anymore. Our job today in the institution is to convert that information as some form of knowledge. How do you convert information into some method of knowledge which then produces some kind of a result? That is the job of an institution today. Can you actually produce wisdom? You can't. But you have to, like I said in the previous case, a vocation is something which you aspire for. Wisdom is something which you will grow up to at some point in life. But at the school, I can at least convert that information into some form of knowledge which is useful for the student. And that is what a school needs to do, to somehow convert that information into some useful form of knowledge which can be applied.
That is important.
That's what a school can do. While also talking that there is wisdom
out there.
You will grow up to it. You will find your own way, then you will reach it in your own sweet time. But it is still there. But you are somewhere here in the middle. And this is exactly what a school needs to produce in terms of a way of making knowledge out of all that information which is lying out there. What is relevant? What is irrelevant? How do you sift through it? How do you find your way through it? So sometimes we keep asking ourselves, as teachers, what is our role here today? If we are not here to provide information, then why are we coming to college? I go trekking into the forest. My phone tells me which tree is what. I can shoot and that photograph will tell me this tree is this and that tree is that and stuff like that. But every now and then you always hear of these incidents where a set of people went out hiking into the forest and they got lost. And not available for 2 days, 3 days, and then somebody suddenly found them and all that. The information of the forest everybody has. What trees grow where, which tree looks what, and you take a photograph, it will tell you exactly what tree it is and all. You still need a guide in the forest. What is the guide for? The guide is there to help you navigate from point A to point B depending on where you want to go. If you want to go to a waterfall, you want to go to a place to stay, or you want to do a campsite, or you want to simply take a trek and come back, or go up to the hill, or go up to the mountain and come back, or whatever it is. A guide is required because he knows the best way to go from point A to point B and to, sift through the unnecessary information. The information which is not required, he keeps aside and takes you from point A to point B in the shortest possible distance with the least possible harm to you. A teacher's role today is that. You're a guide in this forest now. There is all kinds of information available there. As a teacher, it's your job to say, if you are going from here to here, this is the information you require, leave the rest. You don't need it. So in the process of design, like we talked about, there are so many parameters which you're kind of addressing most of the time. I need to know your narrative. And if your narrative says that I need to go from here to here, and this is the route I'm taking, I'm planning to do a green building, or I am planning to make a building which will be a landmark in the city, or I am planning to do a building which is absolutely people-friendly in some ways. Makes a great public space, a great place for people to hang around. Tell me what your narrative is. Then as a mentor, I am the guide to tell you what information is relevant for you and what is not relevant for you. And for that narrative, how do you then traverse? That becomes the job of the teacher, where the useless information or unnecessary collection of information is sifted, and you look at the information which is required for your narrative. I need to do this, then this is the information you require. The rest of the information is useless. It's only coming in the way of you doing what you're supposed to do.
And the curriculum, was it different from the conventional curriculum when you designed? Or how was it different? What was the thought process went into designing a curriculum?
Like I said, we are still falling under the WCFA Technical University. It's a curriculum followed by all the schools of architecture within the state, because we all come under the same technical university. But we have taken the freedom of, tweaking the curriculum in a manner to satisfy our needs. Like I said, our needs being what? One, to see that the students realize that any design, in whatever form, at whatever complexity, works under a context. There is no design which can work without a context. So to make students sensitive to context from a very early stage, like I said, from the second year to third year to fourth year, from the village to the town to the city, and to other levels of complexities of a context, saying that without a context, it's difficult to imagine a design in isolation. How do you design something where there is zero context in that sense? So that was something which the syllabus or the curriculum actually doesn't state. It is something which we have put for ourselves, saying that our students need to be sensitive
to the context,
to the context that they live in or breathe in, which I'll continue from our previous conversation in terms of, that is where sometimes I guess as an architect practicing within the Asian context, not just our country, in the Asian context, sometimes we are different from architects who practice in the West. So the difference being probably the fact that we are not fully artists in that sense, whereas the architect in the West is to a very large extent an artist in the truest sense. He can think, he or she can work with absolute freedom in an environment where that kind of art is appreciated in its fullest extent. We are still growing economies. We have lot of things to be built in the built and the unbuilt environment, which could, like I said, make a difference to society at large. Like I said, design has that power to make a difference. But in our context, the architect probably needs to get his hands a little more dirtier than to be able to sit on this pedestal and say, I am an artist and I am untouchable at some level. In our context, I think we need to step down a little and get our hands dirty in the real world if we have to actually make a difference. And the education process needs to help that, needs to help produce people who will go out there and get their hands dirty, who will actually go out there and make a difference and see the power of what design can do to the environment that this country offers. And there is so much, like I said, like we talked earlier, there is so much of opportunity out there in the rest of this country, where away from the cities, if one were to say that, where actually design can make a difference. But then education has to help people to realize that. If we keep architectural education at a level where we are this elite professionals who sit in ivory towers, if you want to call it that, and think of us as this
touch of reality.
Yeah, who can only design in a particular way or in a particular method. I think in our context, in the Asian context, if you want to call it that, I think there is a huge disconnect there. And to a very large extent, I'd say that the education system has not adjusted itself to this reality. The fact that these are large growing economies where there is so much work to be done. We are right now sitting probably as the third largest, the fourth largest economy in the world today, growing at a rapid pace. But as design professionals, how much are we contributing to this economy? We are not geared to create the kind of design professionals who can be a party to this growth.
It's not contextualized.
We are on the fringe. We are standing and watching. We are not actually there. Whereas actually you could be a part of that entire story, where you're actually building and helping make that, helping us reach wherever we are supposed to reach, because you think this is not our work. There, I would say the education system is to blame to a very large extent, saying that we have to make people aware that if you are a professional valued in some ways by society at large, you can't sit on the fringe. You can't be an observer passing comments. Like I said, if you have to make a difference in education, you have to jump into that system and get your hands dirty. This is a similar situation. If you actually want to go out there and say that design will make a difference, you have to jump into that cesspool, if you want to call it, and get your hands dirty. I mean, only then it's possible. You will have to engage with the government. You will have to engage with local bodies. You will have to engage with local governance systems to find opportunities for design where you're actually dealing with people. And stop looking at projects which are, how do you say, this so-called wish list projects.
Right. So you mean contextualizing to a place is the biggest educational reform you would suggest to the Center of Architecture?
Council of Architecture.
Council of Architecture.
Yeah, to have an educational system which is, it has to be cutting edge. Nobody is denying the fact that you have to dream big. Nobody is denying the fact that you have to think out of the box. All that will still remain. Nobody is taking away from that. Nobody is saying that go down and start building in mud. It's not that. Your ability to think still has to be top notch at the highest level. But looking at contemporary realities in which you're working, looking at realities where actually you can make a difference with the thinking which is probably world class. So you need both. You need thinking which is out there, almost at cutting edge level.
World class thinking, local execution.
But working at realities which are yours, which are current, which are local, which are there hitting you in the face.
That
But
makes education very impactful.
only then it will make a difference. Otherwise, like I said, we become bystanders. It's like when we were standing on the sidelines and commenting on architectural education. We are bystanders in the profession. I mean, you're standing on the sidelines and commenting, oh, if only we could do this, if only. As professionals, we sometimes refuse to engage with the government. We refuse to do government jobs. We refuse to work with public infrastructure and projects which actually will make impact to people's lives, because you think that they are not projects worth doing. So that is what I would say, commenting from the sidelines. Very easy to do that.
But it's really difficult to put it in the curriculum, not contextualizing to a place. So, because every space is different.
So every region can be different.
Yeah.
No, why should the north of India? It's like bylaws right now in the country. Bylaws for building are more or less becoming uniform across every city. What are bylaws in Bangalore? The same in Bangalore, or the same in Delhi, or the same in Chennai. Why? The climate of those places are different. The demography is different. The people are different. The culture is different. The method of open spaces, the way people use open spaces is different. So why should the bylaws be the same? But then somewhere in our ways of thinking, we have this tendency to rationalize things.
Right.
And say that if it is working here, I mean, we all love to say that I want to make a Singapore out of Bangalore or a Dubai out of something. Why do you want to make a Singapore out of a Bangalore? A Bangalore is Bangalore. No, make a better Bangalore.
So any other suggestion apart from contextualizing in the curriculum to improve the curriculum of
Well, like I said,
architecture?
a shift in focus from skill to thinking, which is extremely important. And the faster and the more forceful it is, the better it is. Saying that stop focusing so much on getting people industry ready. Stop worrying about how they'll find their jobs. Instead, start thinking about how will they survive if they don't learn to think. And educational institutions are the only places where you can actually teach them to think in the right manner. The profession will not allow you to do that, because the profession will bring in hard realities. And when you start succumbing to hard realities, thinking goes out of the window very fast. So the only way to sustain a professional in tomorrow's professional arena is only if you have giving him the ability to walk out there and be a thinking person who can think for himself. That is the best thing education can give you today, in any field, not just architecture.
Right. How architecture teachers are formed, and is teaching treated as a craft, or is it a fallback career? Not in this institute, but generally in the whole landscape of.
Ideally, a teacher in a school of architecture should have dabbled for some time at least in the profession. Even if I have interests in writing, or if I have interests in literature, or I have interests in research and stuff like that, somewhere an experience of even a year or two or whatever in what is this profession all about, I think is critical in some ways for teaching, basically because students who walk out or students who are there in the campus are not necessarily trained to look at alternatives right from beginning. They have come here to the campus to become architects, primarily. Along the way, I may probably get interested in something else. Along the way, I may become a journalist, or along the way, I may become a photographer, or along the way, I may become something else. But that is not why you joined the School of Architecture. Primarily, you joined the School of Architecture wanting to become an architect. So if that is the backbone of an institution in some ways, saying that is why students primarily join a school in architecture. Along the way, they may find other interests which they may want to pursue after 5 years. But that is something which they will learn to figure out by themselves over the 5 years, or probably over 7 years or 8 years or whatever it is. But when they join, they have all joined with one clear notion that at the end of 5 years, I will become an architect. Now, as a teacher, teaching a student who has come with that expectation here, there has to be a certain understanding of what is this profession of architecture in which the student will walk out into. As a teacher, I need to know what is that profession. I myself may have other interests in life, which is perfectly valid. as a teacher, you're free to have research interests or writing interests or other hobbies or other interests of practicing the same profession. Like I said, practicing architecture doesn't necessarily mean practicing architecture. You can be an architect in so many other ways. As an individual, I have the right or I have the interest to pursue this profession through so many other ways. But as a teacher, if I have a certain knowledge of how the profession works, it puts me in a better shoe or in a better standing to talk to a student in terms of what is he or she going to encounter when they walk into the or what are the skills he or she would require when they walk into the profession, or what is the thinking that is essential for a professional called architect, for which sometimes I think the teachers are not fully trained. I think that is at some levels extremely essential for teachers to be aware of what the profession is all about. Because sometimes the lack of awareness creates a cocoon in some ways,
Right.
which is your comfortable territory in which you exist. And sometimes you drag your students into that cocoon and they also feel happy in that space for some time. When they actually encounter reality at some level, there is sometimes a disillusionment. One needs to have, how do you say, a clear balance between your own professional interests and what then would be your advice or your method of interaction with a group of students who actually are there thinking that they would be walking out as professionals. So how do I make them encounter that real world in a way where my advice or my interaction or my method of engagement will in some ways help prepare that individual for what is out there.
Why did you take up teaching along with practice?
Like
What is a pleasure in teaching?
Like I said, for me and for all of us who started this, I think teaching has been a tremendous learning experience. And it has always been like I said, quid pro quo. You learn while you teach. So the office benefits because of the fact that you teach. Teaching benefits because of the fact that you're in practice. So it is a give and take both ways. Because of your professional background and your professional experience, your real world encounters, your real world experiences with material, with technology, with people and stuff like that, there is a way in which you can engage with students which brings all those realities to the classroom. Hence makes it real for them in some ways. And for you, the academic world is like I said, an experimental platform where all the ideas which otherwise are so difficult to, how do you say, even imagine in an office environment are ideas which you're suddenly exposed to when you come to a school.
Nice.
And it's so easy when it is in a school.
Nice.
And it's so easy when it is in a school. And you sometimes walk back with those ideas back to your, I'm not saying you're copying those ideas, but you sometimes are so inspired by probably a student's work, which then suddenly triggers some idea, which then helps you in practice somewhere. So it works both ways.
What makes a good teacher? Like students call you their favorite teacher. Professionals recommend you as the best educator. So what do you think makes a good architecture teacher? Is it different from being a good architect?
Two things. I think essential, and this I think is not just an architectural teacher. I think any teacher for that matter. I go back to teachers who taught me also. So as a teacher today, when you walk into a school, there are two things which I think are extremely essential. One is phenomenal amount of patience. The ability to listen before you speak. Because like I said earlier, it is finally a way of finding an idea which the student has or is groping to find. Sometimes it is through words, sometimes it's through sketches, sometimes it's through drawings, sometimes unable to express. So the patience to wait for that person to articulate or to help him find where is it he or she is going with an idea. That requires tremendous patience basically because you have to wait till he or she finds that space. Patience is a huge must. The ability to listen, extremely important because as teachers we have this tendency to speak. Sometimes speak out of turn. And when you start speaking, then the student shuts up. Because everybody loves to listen to somebody who's already speaking. So it takes a lot of sometimes I would say holding back to say, no, I will not speak. Let he or she speak. Because unless they somehow find the voice to express themselves, sometimes hesitatingly, sometimes shyly, sometimes with lot of underconfidence or whatever it is, they have to find that space to be able to speak what is running through their minds. And your job is to nudge or somehow make them find that space.
Bring that conversation up.
Because without that, the confidence will not come. Because finally it is, like I said, it is their ideas that you want to propagate, not your ideas. Because if you start speaking, then it's your idea. It is my way of thinking. It is the way I would look at a problem. It is the way I would design. Because I have 30 years of experience. I can do it in 5 minutes. If that is what I bring to the table, then the other person is only lapping it. It becomes easy. And students love. I mean, somebody is giving out solutions. I mean, you would happily take it.
So you mean role of a teacher is to be like a catalyst to bring students' ideas out faster?
I mean, it is a painful process. It's a tiresome process sometimes as a teacher, and it is sometimes tiresome for the student also, because he or she is groping and you're not giving the solution. So sometimes it is tiresome for both parties. But then that is the only way it will work, because finally at the end of 5 years, you're not going to go out with 3 or 4 extra degrees because you've been teaching 30 years or 40 years. It is that student after 5 years who's walking out with a degree in architecture. With what confidence will he or she walk out? What are you equipping that person with when they walk out in 5 years to face, like I said, a difficult real world outside? And that is only confidence. The ability that I will do something with myself. I will do something and I'll make a career out of this. Or I know I will definitely do something with my life. That is the confidence you want. Like we were talking a few minutes earlier in a different platform. The fact that a 21 or a 22 or a 23-year-old, when they walk out of a college at that age, they should walk out with the confidence to actually make a difference. And an institution's job is to provide that platform and the confidence with which they would walk out and say, I will change the world tomorrow. And not say, I am going out there to make a living. That you will do anyway.
You don't need a college.
I don't need an institution for that. That you will anyway make a living. The point is, do I have the confidence as a school to send out somebody out there saying that this person is walking out with this attitude which says that I have the confidence not just to make a life out of myself, I will actually go out there and change the world.
That's a brilliant pleasure in teaching.
That's the biggest kick that one can think of. I mean, if only all students from your institute walk out with that kind of confidence.
Wow.
I mean, that would be the day where you would really feel proud for having done what you've done. Hope to get there. Let's see.
So what's the most surprising thing a student has taught you, either about architecture or about yourself as a teacher?
Most surprising thing?
Yeah.
Well, that is a tough one. I'm sure a lot of people have said a lot of things. The simplest or the most common things which have always been is that you don't scold enough. You're too nice sometimes. Not as a compliment. I take that as a rebuke sometimes, saying that sometimes you do need to be hard. Sometimes you do need to show your displeasure. Sometimes sometimes it is required to not be accommodating. Students after 5 years after graduating have come back and said that if only you had been a little more persistent, if only you had shown your displeasure, if only you were angry sometimes, it would have made a difference. And that is also a learning in some ways.
Can you tell within 5 minutes if someone will become a good architect? And what are you sensing?
That I don't think is a guarantee for anything. 2 reasons. Because I've seen it across 20, 30 years of being in the practice and also in academics. People who sometimes shine in academics are not necessarily the people who shine in the profession. And I'm not saying it negatively. I'm not saying that people who shine in the profession are doing so only because they have done it well economically, or they have done it well by finding the right kind of clients or whatever else. It's not that. It is also the fact that as a profession, sometimes there are other skills that are required. Your academic skills or just being a good designer is sometimes not just the only skill that is required. Sometimes the fact that you know how to deal with a client, you know how to talk to that person right, you know how to get your way around with the contractors, you know how to get work done through a set of people like masons on site or vendors and people like that. Those are skills which the school doesn't teach you. Now, those are skills which you learn when you walk out there in the profession, and some people are so good at it. And as a professional, sometimes probably those are the skills which are getting you your jobs.
Right.
And it doesn't take away from the fact that you are also a great designer on the side. But sometimes I could still be an okay designer, but I have other skills which help me let my practice do well. So, and none of those things are even, how do you say, explored in a school. So it's very difficult to say that you can predict X, Y, Z will become something in whatever time frame. I mean, like I said, it's the passion of the individual, number one. It's perseverance, second. And if I were to say, this is a question which a lot of people, a lot of parents of late have been asking, since we are on a platform where a lot of non-architects would be watching this. A lot of parents sometimes ask when the students get admitted to colleges, what will be the first salary that my ward will get when he passes 5 years of architecture? A lot of people are interested in that. Now, I don't remember my parents or anybody in that time ever even thinking about a question like this. But this is a very common question today. An IT professional or an IT graduate, the minute he graduates, is going to get so much. What will my son or daughter, after 5 years of learning architecture, get? A difficult question to answer to a parent who's asking, coming from that perspective. But then I have a different take on it. Don't ask me this question, what will he or she get in the first year as they graduate? Ask me after 10 years, what will my ward be getting as against what, let's say, an IT professional or somebody else would be getting. Let's do that comparison after 10, after 15, after 20 years. Because if your ward after 15 or 20 years is still in the profession and is passionate about what he or she is doing, he would probably, or he or she would probably have a practice, will probably be having clients, and will probably be employed for the rest of their lives without worrying about where their income will come from or who will employ them or where will the jobs come from, because you would have established yourself at a point where you're self-sustaining. As against somebody who after 15 or 20 years is not sure whether he'll have a job or not. So that is not a question which I can answer for you in 1 year's time. Ask me after 20 years. Because if he or she is stuck and done the right thing over 15, 20 years, that person would be an established architect doing just about what he or she likes with the passion that they are bringing to the table and being happy and secure in that space, as against somebody who's still dependent on a job or an employer.
So that's the exact thing you would say if your grandchild asks, should I become an architect?
Obviously. I won't go that far. Just recently, my niece, my brother's daughter, joined a course in animation. Not very far from architecture. Not a known course, or not a course which normal kids today would easily take up to. But like I said, in today's time and space, anything is possible. And the only advice that all of us gave her was that if you love doing this and you have the passion for it, go ahead. And it's her second year in France. She's studying in France, and she's doing a fantastic job.
As a parental concern, so what should a parent look for when choosing an architecture school for their child?
Like I said, I mean, the points of concern are these. I mean, from a parent perspective, I would say, please stop looking for job opportunities for your children. Placement at the end of 5th year. Which job will he or she get? How much will he or she earn as a salary? These should not be your concerns while joining a school of architecture. What your concern should be while selecting a school of architecture is, will my kid or will my child be able to find the space in which he or she will be able to perform at their fullest ability? Will the school nurture that ability? Will the school be able to make a person out of that kid, make an adult out of that kid who has the ability to make his or her own choices wisely?
How would they get to know while visiting the institute?
How will they get to know? Look at the past graduates of that school, see the kind of work the school has produced, interact with the teachers in that school, what kind of vibe or what kind of confidence or what kind of
energy
that comes through those conversations. You will get a hang of whether it is the right environment in which best, I would say, don't even talk to any of these people. Go and talk to the students in the school. In our school, the only thing that we ask every parent to do when they want to get their children to join the school is, number one, please visit the campus. Don't see the website. Don't go by what people are saying. Come and visit the campus first. And so far what has worked for us is that anybody or everybody who has visited the campus has not gone back saying that we will not join the school. Visit the campus, talk to the students. In fact, all the conducted tours in the campus are conducted by the students, not by the faculty, not by the administrative staff. The senior students conduct parents and would-be teachers around the campus. Talk to the students will tell you what the truth is. Because it is their experience finally which will translate to your child. Talk to this. That is the best testament to a school. Are the students in the school happy with what they are learning? Are they okay with the environment? Are they okay with what is being taught? Are they happy with the teachers? They are the best ambassadors for what the school stands for. We could talk 100 things.
Right. After finishing 10 years of materializing this school, so what is the best output, can say, as a byproduct that you are really proud of?
No, the fact is that, like I said, as an experiment, what the school started off as, to where we are 10 years down the line, five batches have graduated, more than 150, 200 students who have walked out of this campus. All the alumni who walk out or have at sometimes come back to the campus and stuff like that, all, including the people whom you met yesterday. Everybody wants to give back to the school in some way or the other.
That's lovely.
Everybody wants to be a part of the school, even if they have walked out of it. They want to be a part of something that is happening in the school. In some ways, they want to give back. So I think that is a certificate enough to say that if a school is a place where the student is not willing to even let go at some point and wants to be a part of that experience in some way, saying that I want to teach here, or I want to do some activity here, or I want to start a research lab here. Can I come and be part of a jury panel here? Can I contribute in some ways? I think that shows the attachment that they have with whatever the school talks about. And it's not necessarily with individuals. It's not necessarily with a set of teachers or a particular teacher or any of that. It's just that they are part of this environment which they are not so easily willing to give up. And I think that itself is a big certificate in some ways. Like I said, this is still a work in progress. None of us are in a position to pat our backs and say we have done a great job. We are not there yet. We are nowhere even close to it, I would say. We have just, I would say, still scratched the surface at some level.
Wow.
And if we actually want to make a difference, I would say the next 5 or 10 years is actually the testament. I mean, that would be the key.
What's ahead?
Yeah. Like I said, there are so many other ways of exploring all these new things. How to handle AI, how to deal with real world problems out there which are impacting the way you look at. Since we talked about spaces for living, where spaces actually matter to how people deal with in their real lives, spaces of living are changing because the live and work spaces more or less kind of colliding. You can work from home, you can work from anywhere you want.
Lifestyles
Places of work are changing because you don't need to be in an office to work anymore. I could be sitting anywhere in the world and working and still logging on and producing work. So a lot of definitions of work, of home, of play, of education. I don't need to go to school to get a certificate anymore. I can do online courses. I can be part of some open university. I can get credits from here and there. So a lot of the known ways of doing things are slowly changing and rapidly changing at that.
Architecture has to adapt to it.
So the spaces that people will occupy to do all these new kind of activities, hybrid activities, if you want to call them that, they will also change. And the faster we realize that and the faster we address those issues, the better.
Wow.
Because your conventional ways of thinking, conventional ways of looking at things are being challenged on a daily basis almost. Do I need to go to theatre anymore? There are no theatres anymore because your big TVs and your fantastic sound systems at home and the OTT platforms where you can plug in and play it whenever you want. I stop it, I restart it, I rewind it, I fast forward it. It gives me so many more options. So my avenues of entertainment are changing. My avenues of shopping and retail are changing because I don't need to go to the shop anymore. I do Myntra, I do this. The product comes home, I try it on, I don't like it, I send it back. So all your standard activities or the standard ways of doing things or the activities which you are so used to doing in a certain manner all your lives are all changing rapidly. So the way the built environment has to adapt to that also needs to change drastically. So which is why we keep saying in school, stop labeling buildings, stop calling them hospitals, stop calling them schools, stop calling them resorts, stop calling them hotels. Because the activity that these so-called labeled buildings had at one point of time are colliding with one another. So it is better to look at the activity that is being performed and then we'll find a label for it later.
So change is always constant and you have to predict the change.
So stop labeling things because labeling makes it very predictable. The minute I say hospital, I know what a hospital is. So the label sometimes stops you from thinking even before you started thinking. Instead, if I look at an activity and say this is a place for healing, and healing in hospitals today is not just one kind of healing. I mean, if allopathy is not doing, the hospital itself will say, please try alternative therapy, or please do yoga, or please do counseling, or please do Reiki, or please do some other kind of healing, because for this kind of malady, probably this will not work. So even normal hospitals are asking you to look at alternative ways of medication or alternative ways of healing. So then healing becomes the word. Hospital is not the word. Or if you say it's a place for learning, then it's probably not a school anymore because half the kids are not even going to schools.
So what's next? Automation, change of spaces, lifestyle?
Yeah, exactly. So your normal ways of living, normal ways of working, normal ways of entertainment, everything is being challenged, which means that your built environment also will drastically change. To add to that, in urban spaces, the other key or the other driver is the fact that your land values and economics of building are also drastically changing. So permanence of a built structure in an urban environment is under question, in the sense that will a building which is built on a particular plot of land last for 50 years, last for 100 years? Probably no. Probably it will last for only 10 years or 20 years because the land value is so precious that the building becomes useless so soon. You would rather put something else in its place, which means that do I need to build for permanence at all, or do I build for temporariness?
Wow.
So there's a lot of questions out there, or a lot of areas of thinking out there to deal with the built world, which are in the next 4 or 5 years. Not 4, I would say it's already changed in most parts of the world. We are just waking up to that fact. But then, as architects, if you're not responding to that, or you're waiting for somebody to prod you to think like that, then you become a reactionary. You're not a visionary anymore. One more quote like that. I mean, when we talked about this small discrepancy, or not discrepancy, this small description of what a civil engineer is and what an architect is and stuff like that. There is also this thing that which normally comes up is that when you use the word architect with something, it normally signifies something with a slightly larger meaning. For example, when you say Nehru was the architect of modern India, or you say somebody was the architect of something else or whatever it is, he's not technically an architect there, but
I'm architect of my dreams.
So use the word architect there basically because the word architect signifies somebody who has a vision. We use the word narrative. Narrative is also a way of looking at something which is out there. When I say a vision, you're also looking at the future. You're not looking at the past most of the time. You're also looking at the future, because when I say a building is going to last for the next 50 years or the building is going to last for the next 100 years, I should know what am I thinking about this for the next 50 or 100 years. So which means I have to project my thoughts not for the solving a present problem, The present problem may be of space or whatever it is which I have to solve for the immediate requirement. But that product or that building will last for the next 25 years, which means I have to at least project myself saying that 25 years hence, how do you think this building will perform? So at least that much I have to project it, which is why it means that I have to have a vision of something beyond what already exists. Now, whether that vision is of the use of a building, or whether the vision is of society at large, or whether the vision is of where is the world going, an architect walking out tomorrow has, or even then for that matter, would have had to have that much of capacity to project what is going to come. And that is another capacity or another thing which as a student of architecture, you are forced to learn, that you are not problem solving for today. Your problem solving for today is a problem solving for the next 15, 20 years. It may look like it's for an immediate solution, but that building is going to last whether you are there or not. So that means your problem solving has to have the ability to take care of problems in the future. So it's not an easy job. So like I said, if requirements itself are changing, or the land uses is changing, the way people use buildings are changing, then how does one then project for 20 years, 25 years?
Good forecasting skills are required.
Or the ability to adapt is probably the next big thing, saying that if it is not this, then
wow,
what?
I think forecasting would be a nice skill, like sorting through data and finding patterns.
Exactly.
And predicting what could be the future.
What could be.
Or even creating a future that you envision, and that future suits that time scale.
So difficult right now because things are changing at such an astronomical pace. To be able to say what is 5 years down the line, right. I don't think any of us are in a position to even say what this world will be in 5 years' time. Forget 20, 25 years. But then, can you at least design for adaptability? Can you design for temporariness? Can you design for things which will contract, expand, take on new functions, reduce if functions are not there? All kinds of possibilities which were not challenges some time back.
And even in terms of materials, new materials are getting invented.
There's so many new technologies out there. So
3D printing.
So there are possibilities which the last generation or our generation probably didn't even think about.
Right.
And which are the new challenges for the current times, if you want to call it that.
Yes. I think I've learned a lot of things, and thank you so much for giving and I made you sit under
that's
this
okay. Fortunately, great weather today.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much
Wonderful
for the opportunity and for the ability to speak about the school and its making. Hopefully, it will be of some use to people who are either pursuing a course in architecture, or for parents who would want their children wanting to pursue this course.
I wanted this to be for architecture educators, but
it could be. It could be for anybody out there.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I have been a little vocal about certain ideas or whatever it is, but then unfortunately, those are ideas which have been formed over the years because of having been in the profession and in this field of education for a long period of time. So some are, sometimes brutally learned facts or brutally learned lessons, and some are realities which we are facing on a day-to-day basis and which we have to react to. But at the end of it, I would say, as a profession, I think even now, after all these years, it is one of the best professions to be in. Two, like I said, it is. I'll give you one more analogy.
Yes.
which is what I keep telling my first year students. There are so many professions out there. There are doctors, there are chartered accountants, there are lawyers, there are all kinds of professions out there. But tell me, when do people go to any of these other professionals?
When they have a problem.
I go to a doctor when I have a problem, medical problem. I go to a lawyer when I have a legal problem. I go to a chartered accountant to solve my financial problems. When do I go to an architect?
When I need a plan.
When I have a dream. Who builds? Only a person who has everything else sorted out, who has no financial problems, who has no legal problems, who has no health issues, who has no other problems in life, I would say, but who has a dream in his life of wanting to build something, of wanting to make a space, of wanting to do something constructive. So you're in the happiest profession in the world, because people come to you with dreams, not with problems.
Nice.
So you can't think of a better profession to be in, because you're dealing, or on a daily basis, dealing with people's dreams.
I have a dream. Since I've not been through the curriculum architecture school, but I want to design my own thing I don't need a degree, right?
You don't need anything.
How can I, give me a guide on how to think about building and designing my own space?
I guess we'll talk about that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.